Well, today is SantaCon. The day that we are recording this is New York's most solemn day.
You're gonna have to explain this to me. What is SantaCon? I have it's in my calendar of New York activities that I don't understand, along with like Fleet Week. So I assume it's also like equal prominence. Right?
I'd been warned about SantaCon. I went to college here, so my first SantaCon, I was like, how bad could it actually possibly be? And I got out of the subway at Astor Place, and as I was walking to like meet friends at a bar, I saw a Santa wearing a swastika who had like vomited all over himself and was passed out on somebody's like stairwell. So like that's the vibe of SantaCon.
You saw a political cartoon in the wild, a somewhat edgier one than like most newspapers, but
I sent it to the New Yorker. They said no.
They said this is too on the nose. Oh my God. Wait, so have you been to New York, Alice?
No, never. I've only ever been through, the closest I've been is through Newark Airport. So I got to look at New York through like a thick pane of glass across like a sort of a multi-mile distance and sort of like longingly be like, yeah, one day I will come to this place where they have unconscious Nazi Santa.
Yeah.
So that's the dream.
The thing about SantaCon too is that I feel like the name SantaCon implies a sort of organization that is not there. It is not a convention by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it's just a bar crawl.
Like, imagine a guy. I'm just imagining a guy now.
I can't do it.
No.
Rotating a guy in my mind.
He's in 3 dimensions. I'm just spinning him around. And this is a guy who grew up with like his parents met at SantaCon, and so like SantaCon is a key part of his like origin story.
Ostensibly, it is for charity. Like they are raising money for like
fuck up
for like cancer awareness, for like prostate cancer awareness or something. I think that's what they claim it is. But I've never seen those receipts.
Though. I was never aware of cancer before this.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the worst of all possible worlds, the first and only podcast where you will be aware of cancer. I am the worst of all possible Brians.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
It's like a memento mori.
And joining us today is podcaster, poster, and fellow Soviet camera enthusiast, Alice Caldwell-Kelly.
You can say the worst of all possible guests, too. It's a pleasure to be here.
Worst of all possible Alice's?
That's right. Thanks for having me.
When I messaged you a few weeks back, I was like, hey, we've been looking for somebody to come on and talk about Hitman. Hitman is a game we've been wanting to talk about on this show for quite a while.
Yeah, and I said yes immediately because, first of all, because the podcast rocks, right? Second of all, because I love the Hitman games, have done since I was a kid. Third of all, because I wanted a lot of emails in my inbox with the subject matter Hitman details, and I wanted to be surveilled by more intelligence agencies than I currently am.
Yeah, how many are you at now, Alice?
They're all trying to get through one door at the same time, and they're getting stuck.
Oh, sure. It's the Mr. Burns intelligence agency problem. Yeah.
Do you think the Three Stooges are like mad that that's like retrospectively that's the Mr. Burns thing now instead of their thing?
Yes. They're rolling in their graves.
But yeah, my Google history for like the last 2 years has always just been like Hitman Italy, Hitman New York, Hitman how to find Hitman.
Hitman rat poison locations. But before we actually get into the game itself, Alice, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about you, the shows you do, and also just your experience with Hitman more broadly.
Oh, God. I mean, I'm not a very interesting person. I just podcast a lot.
That's interesting, inherently.
What I did was I did a soft coup on a podcast called Trashfuture, which you may have heard.
Yes.
Where one of the hosts, Hussein Kasvani, made the mistake of asking to interview me. And I said, sure, gonna take over your podcast, though. I didn't include that bit. It was in white on white.
You had to highlight it too, Lucy.
Yeah, exactly. And then I did a good enough job that they started having me back more and more until I made myself indispensable. And then I started taking, a fifth of their Patreon money. Be careful when you invite me on stuff because this may happen. And then since then, I've sort of broadened out a bit to do 2 other podcasts. I do Well, There's Your Problem, which is on YouTube because it's a podcast with slides about engineering disasters. I do Kill James Bond with Abby Thorne and Devon, which is about sort of like James Bond through masculinity. It's like very, very heavily related. If we talked about video games, like if I weren't the only video game player on that podcast, we would absolutely have talked about Hitman by now.
Yes.
Because they're very much in the same wheelhouse.
Yeah. You could talk about the Hitman movies. Or not. The less said about them, maybe the better. But
yeah, looking at sort of Timothy Oliphant's extremely bald, like shaved bald head for like an hour and a half.
Some people shouldn't be shaving their heads, you know? Like, get Michael Cerverus. Get someone who's already like tried and tested.
We need a canonically bald guy to play somebody like 47.
Get the Tooch in there.
No, get the Tooch in there. We shove Tooch in there. And
that's the thing. You can't make Agent 47 too sexy like that.
No,
I
that's true.
really understand it myself, but people really like Stanley Tucci in like a sexual way, and that's not really the case for Hitman Agent 47. I think when you said Yul Brynner, that was it, and we missed a chance as a society when Yul Brynner died, never to have it. We got to like do the sort of Star Wars thing where it's like, Disney owns your entire soul now. You will perform for us from beyond the grave.
Yeah. When we were going back and forth talking about getting this episode together, you actually sent me a comic that sort of, to you, sums up a lot of what makes your relationship with this game significant. Is that something that you wanted to talk about?
Yes, yeah, I would love to bring this up. So Carson Manier, who is great, by the way, drew this amazing comic for Polygon, Why Hitman is My Favorite Trans Game. And it's like relating the experience of playing Hitman to being a transgender woman. It is something that is made to feel like infiltration to you, even though you have sort of no ill intent, right? And Hitman is like a game about like disguise and appearance, and like those appearances being sort of like enforced in different ways. And you can really, and she does dig into this in a way that's sort of like quite sort of emotional, and it's a way that I had never put that together because I had been playing these games since literally the first one.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, I played it pretty much a couple of years after it came out, and it looked like absolute dog shit. If you look up the concept art for like the original Hitman game, they hadn't worked out what shape a human head was yet. So the guy was just sort of like this plasticine sort of like dummy with really craggy features. But so I never made those connections. So reading this, I was just like, oh yeah, that's actually a really good set of reasons why I might be compelled by this thing about sort of like shifting mutable identities and like the idea of infiltration and deceit and things like that.
That's what makes Hitman such an interesting franchise, is like it's a stealth game in sort of a broad sense of the term, but like it doesn't play like Splinter Cell or Metal Gear Solid or something like that, because you're not infiltrating a military base, except for Colorado.
And there's a reason that's the worst level, right?
Yeah. For the most part, it's about being in public, and it's about inhabiting some way of being in public. Right. That makes the whole enterprise so unique. I don't really know another game that does this.
Right. Social stealth. There have been like a couple of imitators of it, but like none really successfully. It really is sort of like lightning in a jar with these guys, and I'm not sure why, other than that it's a huge amount of work to actually develop the thing.
Well, that's I think an important point is that like Hitman wasn't really Hitman until, I would argue, Blood Money. And then it was the games we're going to be talking about on today's episode, the World of Assassination trilogy, that really made the game kind of what it is when we think about what Hitman is. And I think, Brian and AJ, you actually have some background about the development history of these games, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So IO started in 1998 in Copenhagen. It was a sort of joint venture between Retomoto, which was this very new software studio that was started by a bunch of guys who came from like the demo group scene. And they joined up with Nordisk Film, which is, I think, Denmark's oldest film studio. It was founded in 1906. to make a game studio.
Responsible for such bangers as Train coming directly towards you.
They immediately started work on Hitman Codename 47, right? The very first game in the series.
Right. Well, because they were originally going to do an MMO called Rex Dominus. They wanted to do like a giant like game, and it was a Nordisk film that was like, hey, maybe you should walk before you run.
Right.
And just make like a straightforward shooter.
It's like, it's okay. We cannot all be Lars von Trier from the very beginning. They got Eidos on as a publisher, and they got Jonas Eneroth as the executive producer. Now, Jonas worked on a couple of games that some people have heard of. They're pretty obscure. I don't know, Deus Ex and something called Thief.
Fuck you, really?
The Dark Project, yeah.
Are we talking about my favorite games in the world? Deus Ex, Thief, and Thief 2, all of which are extremely well lit.
Yeah, extremely well lit.
Josh, what happened when you tried to stream Thief the other day?
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, Josh, what happened?
Did you discover that it was perhaps too dark on stream?
Shut up!
I had a very similar experience going back and revisiting Deus Ex. I'm like, it's like, it's so influential. Like, everything you like in a video game is like Deus Ex's fault. I'm like banging this big drum for years and years and years and years. And I actually tried to play the fucking thing, and I'm like, you know what? Actually, maybe the sort of endless reboots of these things are a good thing, relatively speaking.
You're shooting arrows straight into Josh's heart.
I'm just, my baby.
So 47 was like a cult hit. It didn't do poorly, but it was not a big thing, and people were like, "This is kind of weird and obtuse and difficult, and the levels are maybe too large."
Yeah, the best thing that could be said about it was that it introduced ragdoll physics, or it was one of the first games to introduce ragdoll physics.
It was one of the first games to have any kind of physics.
Right.
Like you can walk through like banners, and they'll kind of drape over your big bald head as you do it. And
that's like one of the biggest sort of like things for them. They love to do this still, and it's nice to know that this is like a sort of a franchise moment for them. You know, there's like James Bond has the like da 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 sting, whereas Hitman has like cloth draping over his big bald head as he walks through a doorway.
And so you've actually played this game, Alice. I have not. I did not grow up playing PC games in general.
So Hitman Codename 47, it's like a very early tech demo, really. It allows you to do some interesting things. A lot of the time it's sort of like, you can tell where it loses confidence, basically, and it becomes this narrow shooter. It also sets up the story, which is wild, and unfortunately the rest of the franchise, until like this reboot, The World of Assassination, has been more or less handcuffed to ever since. Which
and
is
even the reboot is like, it's still canonical.
Yeah.
This mad scientist still happened. He's just part of a larger deep state conspiracy. Yeah.
It's like, what if a guy had 7 dads?
Yeah. What if a guy had 7 dads? They were all in the French Foreign Legion together. They were all different races, which allows him to pass for any race on Earth. That is an explicit plot point.
Despite being the whitest man you've ever seen.
Yeah. And he gains like certain talents from each of them, like, like the world's greatest spy is one of his dads, so he can spy better. The world's greatest like shooter is one of his dads, so he can shoot better. Stuff like this.
One of his dads is Phil Collins, which gives him the ability to play the drums in Bangkok.
Noted best drummer in the world, Phil Collins.
I should say also, there's no jokes in this. It's played completely straight. It's played sort of more or less as an action movie. This horrifying plasticine man is out on the trail of his 7 dads. Occasionally lets itself like have a glimmer of what these games are going to become. Like there's a bit where you have to sort of like kill one guy at a meeting of 2 different triad leaders, and you can do that by like knocking out his chauffeur and like placing a bomb in the limo. You can do it with a sniper rifle, and it's this sort of like thing where like there's different moving parts of who gets where on time that's going to become the sort of like the core gameplay element later on. But at this point it's like an interesting sort of experiment before you go back into like shoot 50 guys and they fly across the road because we have ragdoll physics.
I mean it was originally supposed to be like a John Woo action movie. Like, that's really what the main inspiration was. And it was actually Jonas who came in and was like, let's make this a little bit more methodical. Let's actually add in these other elements. Hitman would eventually just become a puzzle game.
So Hitman 2 comes out in 2002.
Hitman 2, man, that's a game that we would do on Kill James Bond as a joke episode. Were that a movie? It's like, honestly, Tumblr have been driving themselves insane about this. Won't be topical anymore when this comes out, but Hitman 2 is the closest thing to Goncharov that has ever been made as a video game.
Yeah, I mean, it refines a little bit more. It gets you. It allows you to be a little bit smoother in the executions. It gets released on consoles, and it's a surprise big hit. People see the bald guy and they're like, I want to be that cool bald guy with the gun. He's wearing a suit. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Suit up. I love How I Met Your Mother. So
it was the era.
So in the wake of that success, their publisher, Eidos, decides to acquire them.
Rest in peace, Eidos.
Yeah. So Hitman Contracts gets released 9 months later, and it's just 9 months straight of crunch, and they just push that thing out. People really liked Contracts. It kind of recycles a couple of Codename 47 levels into it.
Yeah, it's sort of like a best of, but it works really well when the games that you're working with have the bits that you want to do sort of encased within them. It's sort of like mining those out and sticking them in a new game was very worth it.
And then we get the big one, Blood Money, in 2004. This is the game that is like, here we go. We have the sandbox. We have the ways to hide. We have a lot of just incredible racism right from the opening.
Oh my
jump.
God. The beginning of the game is so fucking racist.
It's maybe the most racist tutorial in gaming.
It's like, what happens in this tutorial?
Okay, so Alice, do you want to explain what happens in the tutorial of Blood Money?
The tutorial for Blood Money, which is unskippable the first time, so you have to see it. They're really proud of this. Is a sort of a Lincoln lawyer, like an itinerant lawyer, has been abducted, I guess, into a fairground, an abandoned fairground pier, which is populated with some of the worst racial stereotypes you'll meet. Let's say gangsters and sort of wherever your mind takes you from there. If you imagine that you are a Danish game developer, the most racist combination of two things.
Well, and if you're a Danish game developer, it's around Christmas time. You look out the window and you're like, I've got an idea.
The lawyer character too is definitely Jewish coded also. It's very much, It's really uncomfortable.
Oh. The rest of the game is not quite at that level, but and this was what all games were doing at this point, because it was that sort of edgy, GTA type humor, which you can see kind of carrying over even in this series through 2016. They even went back and removed lines from Hitman 2016 when they released the sequels. And so Blood Money comes up with you're inside of a small diorama and you can walk around and see what things you can manipulate. You're in a new life, you can go into the house, you'll find out one of the security guards is sniffing the wife of the house's panties, so you can put chloroform on them so that he can pass out and steal a costume. So it's a lot more of this refining of what they were doing from the first couple games, or first three games.
One of the beauties of this is that it presents you with a system that seems to be functioning very well. And New Life is no argument the best level in Blood Money.
Yes.
But all of these things are someone's having a party. There's a witness in witness protection in suburbia and everything's very calm. You are the one who is choosing to introduce chaos into this environment. Yeah. And until then it just functions. It just goes round and round without you. I really like that because it's such a contrast to what else was being made at that time. And now every video game does this. Everyone steals from this. I played the new Call of Duty the other day, and it does the sort of mandatory social stealth sections where it's
really,
where you're in Amsterdam, which has been taken over by terrorists and drug lords and drug cartels because modern.
How many times has that happened?
A whole different other thing. And you have to do this sort of social stealth and introduce a gunfight into this crowded situation. And it's no, I've seen this done better by racist Danes.
Yeah. Well, it's very telling. If you watch the documentary that NoClip did, they like have this interview section where they talk about making the level Mumbai, and they're like, yeah, so we actually traveled to Mumbai, and it was nothing like we thought. We thought it was just going to be like disease and poverty and like
people wearing rags. Yeah.
But it turns out like there's actually some good parts of Mumbai, so we really tried to put that into the game,
go, guys.
and it was like, oh, great.
But on a mechanical level, I think the thing that Blood Money really nails in missions like A New Life, the one in the Opera House is another one that I think is really great. You are in a set piece, essentially. The world can go on without you, or you can interject yourself at different points, but you have the freedom to do it at the point that you want, how you want. And I would argue that up until Blood Money, no other game had done anything even close to this. You have immersive sims, obviously, like Deus Ex, where you have the ability to use the tools of the world to make things happen. But to make things happen in the context of sequences that are entirely or primarily scripted is brand new. It takes certain elements of like adventure game exploration, couples them with the mechanics that are more common to like a stealth shooter, and creates what is basically an entirely new genre.
Yeah. Right. And so for the next game, they abandoned that entirely.
Yes.
Yeah. By the time that Blood Money gets released, all the old IO guys are basically gone. No one who worked on Codename 47 is still working on a Hitman game.
Cancel culture came for all of us, I guess.
Well, they reformed, Eidos reformed Rito Moto, and then the old guys went back over to that. Only ever made like one free-to-play game, and now it's in bankruptcy. The new guys came in, and they looked at things that they needed to do to make it smoother, especially on console. I think what you'll see if you play Absolution versus this new trilogy, the controls are basically the same.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas if you play Blood Money, it's a lot more like, oh, fuck, all the buttons are different. Everything is different now.
Blood Money, Mr. Hitman, Mr. 47 sort of control. He's like, basically, he has vehicle controls, right?
Yes.
And you kind of, a lot like me and going back to Deus Ex, right? You can trick yourself into thinking that you liked that. And I think, because for a long time, like there's a huge gap in release, right? Between Blood Money and Absolution. For a long time,
7
Blood
years,
Money was it. And believe me, I played it every single one of those 7 years.
Same.
I was just like, when are they going to do another one of these? And so I was very excited to play the new one. And this was, I think, probably the first time that the video game industry sort of raised my hopes and dashed them in the way that it does.
So what's it like playing Absolution? Like what makes it so different from Blood Money?
It's a linear action game.
Yes. With significantly, I don't want to call it worse writing, but it's a tonal mismatch, right? Blood Money sort of experiments with this idea of like Agent 47 as like this sort of deep misanthrope. And so like all of its characters are grotesque. And you can really get into the weeds of like, of course they're grotesque in ways that are sort of like, rich but also sexualized, and it's like this is how a sexless sort of like professional killer might see everyone around him. That's reasonable. Where Absolution goes with that is, what if we did sort of like grindhouse nihilism with that?
Right.
It's very it's very like 70s like exploitation film. There's nuns in thigh-high fishnet stockings with machine guns.
Well, and Brian, you were saying I think it was either in a text to me or in the chat where at the beginning you were like, hey, this isn't so bad. You got like 2 hours in.
There was a linear tutorial, and I was like, well, that's just like Blood Money, which has a linear tutorial. Let's see how this goes. There's a little bit of linear stuff. And then there's like one level that's kind of open plan towards the beginning because they got complaints at E3, and then they spent 2 years of crunch putting in more Hitman-ish things. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can feel this. This actually is all right. And then the rest of the game goes in a straight line. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm bored now. It's not horrible, but like, it's just not right.
A straight line from like place to place in rural America, which is like,
you're in like South Dakota.
What?
One of the strengths of the franchise before this was sort of a villain of the week thing, right? Which is you load into a level, this is this level's dipshit. This is this level's like rich piece of shit, and you have to ruin their life ultimately by ending it. Whereas here it's like, no, we have a recurring villain, a recurring sort of like juicer antagonist, and we're just gonna like follow this through a series of levels that are very similar in like feel and setting, as opposed to the sort of like jet-setting, globe-trotting Hitman.
Yeah. And so they realize that they need to make another step. It's kind of disappointing performance. Like, critics give it okay reviews, but it's just like, obviously, like, there's a problem here. But they had an online component where users could make their own contracts, right? Highlight any NPC and make them the target of the level. What they found was that even up to the release of Hitman 2016, 50,000 people were still actively playing that player contracts mode.
Wow.
That's
yeah.
wild to me. I would never have guessed this. I knew it was popular, but
so what they do is they decide to come up with this trilogy. No one actually calls it this, but it's called the World of Assassination. Internally, It's called the Netflix of Assassination. They decide to do games as a service.
Right.
And with Hitman 1, you get games as a service in one of the most misguided ways possible. They have made a really good game, but they decided to release each level 1 month apart from each other.
See, I'm a little freak 'cause I liked this. I really enjoyed this because I've found that they dropped this pretty quickly, and they did 2 more in this trilogy where they were like, no, we're just going to release them sort of like on block, right? Yeah. And I did the same thing I play every other video game like, which is, you know, I sort of disappear for 2 days, play everything, and then it's done, right? I really enjoyed the sort of I could see what they were going for with the episodic thing, which was, you're meant to play these levels a bunch of times. You're meant to deconstruct them and take them apart and put them back together and do a bunch of different things with different tools that you unlock as you replay them. And then you have a total understanding of the whole story from a bunch of different angles. Now it's time for your sort of next piece of story in the next level. I really found that a sort of a compelling loop. But, you know, people don't really respond to it well, so I'm outvoted.
Well, were you there, Alice, on day 1 when Paris dropped?
Yes.
Okay.
They had like a beta release for Paris, which I played in the tutorial levels, and so I was very into those. I also think, by the way, best tutorial level in like conception and setting that I've ever played. I just want to talk about that really quickly.
The boat level, is that the one, the prologue?
Yes, yeah. So the idea with the tutorials is that it's a test that's been set as sort of like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People sort of hiring interview process thing.
Yeah.
They've set up a gigantic, like, it's a set. It's full of just flats.
Yes.
And there's
actors?
It's so creative. Yeah, like all of the backgrounds are backdrops against like this fucking missile silo that they've built the environment in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In order to escape, you have to get to a cardboard helicopter that is literally stenciled with like helicopter on there by some props team who has had to like assemble it. And I knew they had got the humor right when I saw one NPC. So there's a guy on the boat that you can knock out to get a chef's disguise. In order to do this, they set you up with a melee weapon, a frying pan next to him. Once you knock him out with the frying pan once, I don't know if this changes over playthroughs or if this is just something that you only notice the second time, but because these are like meant to be replayed differently, that NPC, who was meant to be like an actor playing a chef who you then hit with the thing, has a giant bandage and a giant bruise on the bit of the model where you hit him with the frying pan.
That's amazing.
Wow. And I just, as soon as I got that, I'm like, oh, okay, you hit the guy, you like kill the guy, someone calls like for a reset, and then you do it all over again. And he's just been standing there.
But you're still literally hitting that man. Yeah. Oh, that fucking rules.
And that guy's just like, please God, don't let him get that frying pan again.
There have been worse working conditions for extras, I think.
That's true.
I feel like everybody in here can speak to that.
Oh God, when I was working on that fucking MacGruber TV show, Christ almighty.
Yeah, you almost boiled alive, right, Brian?
Oh, it was horrible. I got sand in my eyes. We were dressed as prisoners at an active prison, and there was some miscommunication with the guards. We're not going to talk about my movie career. And then this bald guy
showed up.
And
the warden mysteriously disappeared, but was bald now.
But yeah, so that's the tutorial that brings us into the first level in Hitman, the brand new Hitman trademark, first game in the World of Assassination trilogy. The very first level here is Paris. And I think the best thing to talk about with Paris, rather than going into like extreme detail about like every single thing you can do, is just to frame up first, like
throwing like a sheaf of notes in the trash.
Oh my God. It's like you can do literally anything. And I think that's the thing that makes Paris so interesting up top, right?
Yeah.
It's so fucking chonky. They had so many ideas that they wanted to execute on it. And
I mean, it really was like their pilot. This this is by far, the devs say this is the most complex level in the entire series, in all of Hitman ever made and probably ever to be made, because they had to make all of this work.
Right.
And one of the most complicated things is that this has the most AIs in it of everything to make the whole like runway system work properly.
Oh, absolutely. Medea Anderson, who was one of the like lead level designers for this trilogy, for the No Clip doc, they asked her, like, would you go in and change anything? And you just see like fear fill her eyes. And she's like, no, I would not mess with any of the AI in this level. I would be terrified to do that. And it's like, it seems to be a very precipitous sort of like balancing act. There's so many plates going at once in this level.
What I think really balances it, though, is that it's not just like, it's a tremendously complex thing that is very legible. It seems quite simple. You look at this and like, if you don't know anything about how video games are made, which is to say if you're me, right, you look at this and you go, this is a box. This is a box that has 4 floors in it. It is populated with stuff that sort of like broadly reacts to you sensibly. That must be easy to make, I assume. I can't hear all of these game developers crying.
This level is called the Showstopper. It is so named because there is a fashion show going on. You as 47 need to assassinate 2 targets. Victor Novikov, who is basically the money man. He's a Brazilianaire. And then Dalia, Margolis, right?
Margolis.
Margolis.
And Victor is like an old Russian oligarch who made a lot of money once the Soviet Union fell. He's a gangster, and now he's trying to like just get out of that and be a French fashion label owner. Dalia Margolis is like, at one time was the top supermodel in the world, but she also worked for Mossad, and both of them are actually like military secrets brokers.
Right.
And so there is also this military secrets auction going on the upper floors.
Right. Now, Paris is an example of what the developers call a fortress level.
Yes.
In the No Clip documentary, How the Simulation of a Hitman Level Works, which is one of a series of docs they've done, they talk a bit about this. The description they give in that documentary is a distinct area the player must break into. And that sort of goes back to what you were saying, Alice, about how like it's just a big box. There's 4 stories. There are some areas that you can enter pretty freely. There are other areas that are super duper off limits. And it's up to you to figure out a way to get into those off limits areas so that you can, hit the man.
Yeah, and it serves to like the narrative very well, in that it's sort of like it's taking you by the hand and it's explaining with a series of alphabet blocks. Well, it's not even explaining anything. It's trying to get you to think about like ideas of class and hierarchy very gently by being like, hey, do you ever think it's strange how all the service staff work in the basement and all the rich people are on the top floor, and you have to sort of like, gain identities of progressive value to infiltrate those spaces? Do you think that's interesting? Do you want to think about that maybe for the rest of the game?
And primarily like, this introduces, even though we had a little bit of this in the tutorials, we have this idea of like what the costumes are, what they can do. There are some things that I wish could be a little bit clearer, like the fact that you can just poison things out in the open if you're a waiter, because people think, oh, he's just pouring drinks.
My favorite bit of visual shorthand in this game, which is that when a drink is poisoned, the game needs you to know that. So what it does is it creates an invisible to NPCs cloud of like green or red fumes coming off of the drink. And it's
gaseous death.
Yeah, it's really funny to imagine someone lifting like a brandy snifter that's like off-gassing fucking cyanide.
But it's also one of those things where legibility is always at the forefront of what this game is trying to do. And actually, I think they improved it over the course of the World of Assassination
of the 3 games,
development. Because, like, if you've poisoned a drink as a player and you can't tell that drink is poisoned, or you can't remember whether you poisoned it with a lethal or non-lethal poison, then you just have to remember it. And that takes up cognitive load that could better be used watching for like a guy who might come by and ruin your entire assassination plan.
It also sets up one of the best feelings you can get in this game, which is when a plan goes right by accident, or you cover yourself in a way that you didn't expect that you would. When you round a corner in time to see an NPC you had forgotten about, drink a poison drink you had forgotten poisoning. That's a really satisfying feeling. It is like, truly, I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah.
This is also one of the few levels where you can kill one of your targets with the body of another target if you launch the fireworks off in the back, because there's also fireworks barges in the back, and so you can have a remote to launch those. They'll both go out like, no, that's too early, and Dahlia will be on the upper balcony and Novikov will be down on the ground, and you can just push her over and she will fall on him and they will both die at once.
Wow. Brian, you have completed all of these missions 100%, right? Like you have done...
Not 100%, no, especially not Hitman 1, because there are so many challenges.
But you've level 20 all of them.
I've gotten to level 20 on everything.
Raising my hand to say that I have actually done that.
Alice, you have 100%ed every level, Alice?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I got every challenge in every level on Hitman 1. It took me for fucking ever. But it sort of interacts with a sort of a completionist part of my brain.
Well, and Hitman for me took a long time, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it took a long time for me to figure out how to play it.
Right.
The things that were legible for you were not at all legible for me because I'm not very good at video games. But once I got it, I can't put it down. This has basically been the only game I've played for the last year, this trilogy.
Yeah.
And what Paris does sets up also like all the dynamics that you're going to see in a space. Like you said about progressive status and going up in the fortress, but there's also things like you have the stage, the runway, the models. You have the backstage. Those models are persistent throughout. They go on, they walk the runway, they go back, they get their makeup checked out, they take a smoke break outside. So you get like where the catering has been set up, you get where like the temporary like production cases are just sitting out by the building. You have all of these different zones, and you see all the different ways that every room interacts with each other.
And I feel like I also ought to clear one thing that I don't think we've explicitly done, just in case, for people who are listening to this episode who have never played Hitman before. Just to describe what the core gameplay loop actually looks like. You go into a given level. Again, there are areas that you can access immediately using your standard suit. There are other areas that you cannot access, or more accurately, you can access them, but if somebody spots you, then it will be like, hey, you're not supposed to be in here. And they will either chase you out or engage with you. Like they'll actually start fucking blasting.
You can play this as a straight stealth game.
You can.
Never use a disguise if you want to. In fact, it rewards you for doing that. This little challenge thing for doing it, just wearing the suit that you came in.
The way that you will mostly be playing this game is that you will be finding throughout these levels different targets who are, somebody will just like be hanging out sort of in a corner where, nobody else can see them back there. And it's a man
Time for choking.
And if this is a man who is approximately the size of 47, what you can do as Agent 47 is you can whack that guy, or you can choke him out from behind, or whatever.
He can pass as any pants and shoe size.
Right.
Yes. 7 dads.
Right.
Yeah. The thing about 47 is that, like, as opposed to, again, other stealth games where you're going to be like crawling through vents and you're live. And even though he can climb like Prince of Persia for some reason, because he had one of his 7 dads was the Prince of Persia.
Jake Gyllenhaal specifically.
Actually, it was Jordan Mechner.
Agent 47 is really trying to restore the Shah to power. But he's not slick. He's a big rectangle. You have this 6'2" refrigerator walking around in a suit. And
we haven't even mentioned the fact that he has a barcode on the back of his old ass head.
And almost nothing you wear will cover that up. You will almost always, unless you get a guy who has a wig, have the barcode showing on the back of your head.
But again, it's one of those things that for the sake of legibility and fun, they just take it for granted, because the moment that you knock out another guy and put on his costume, and by the way, it's usually advisable to find a place nearby that you can dump the body so nobody finds it. The moment that costume is on, you are, for the vast majority of people, whatever that role is. Now, there will still be a few
waiter,
people around.
Hairdresser, cook, whatever,
There will still be a few people around. They are known in the design lingo of the game as enforcers. They have a little dot over their head. So long as they have that dot, they can spot you. And in that moment, they'll be like, hey, I am a waiter. I know the other waiters. you're not a waiter.
Some waiters just aren't observant and some are. And same thing with like you get security guards and you can walk around with guns and things like that. But then there are also VIPs that you can dress as. So the main VIP that you can get a hold of in Paris is Helmut Kruger, a big supermodel who looks exactly like you.
Yes.
Yeah. Where I would imagine the barcode would actually come in handy because it's like, oh yeah, he's a German supermodel. Like, of course he's going to have a barcode tattooed on the back of his head.
And then you also put on makeup.
And that's the thing is that like this is one of the great things about Paris, sort of like setting its stall out for like Netflix Hitman, if you like, is the level of sort of suspension of disbelief that you need to have going in here. It explains that to you by being like, there's a guy who looks exactly like you and he's here tonight.
On a huge banner out front.
I think, Alice, you had mentioned sort of the humor of this game, the sense of humor of this game.
Yeah.
This is one case where they set the tone humorously for this as well by being like repeatedly lampshading and pointing out that Helmut Kruger he looks exactly like 47. The joke being that once you knock him out and become him, you're going to look just like him.
And it's like, it was a breakthrough for the designers too, because they were like, we didn't really understand the humor of the series until we cracked Helmut Kruger.
Oh, interesting.
I'm surprised that Danes couldn't understand the humor, but
well, they sort of went to the traditional thing of a guy applying a bunch of like makeup to his face, but like in a slightly different direction, mercifully.
Yeah. Like there are no points where Agent 47 does drag, and I'm sure there were a lot of very odd conversations that happened at IO at some point to be like, I'm glad they didn't. Considering Hitman Blood Money, I'm glad they did not go that route.
I mean, I was just making a blackface joke, but that too.
Oh, yes, that too. I'm glad he also doesn't do that.
No, that's what we do in the Netherlands.
It's okay. One of his 7 dads is black, I'm sure. So
Agent 47 notes app apology. What I did was misconstrued one of my 7 dads.
I will do better, I promise. I'm making a donation.
I hear you. I'm listening.
Like at the window outside right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm listening to you right now.
And so what VIP costumes get you is also like very specific scripted encounters. You can walk up to someone and talk to them and say, hey, I'm the guy who sucks. Also, I have depression. But Helmut Kruger also is like a skeleton key. He can go almost everywhere in the level. You can go right up. You don't even get frisked. You're just like, you are the guest of honor. Right. And you can really get a feel for the level once you figure out how to knock out this crowd.
Yeah. And they make Agent 47 funny in a kind of very quiet way, because previously, like all of the humor in the Hitman games, there was some, especially in Blood Money, was playing against him. He's the straight man. He's very deadpan. Yeah. And obviously you have to keep that as sort of like part of the character. He's sort of like, a human robot. But the way they do this is a sort of very unsubtle, but sort of in a way that like comes back around. Like you kind of, you roll your eyes, but once it happens often enough, you kind of come to like it. Thing of like, every single thing that this fucker says is like a double entendre on I am going to kill you.
Yes.
And he loves a pun.
It's like how James Bond always has a sex puns, but 47 doesn't have sex. He only
has murder. Right.
Yes.
And I think, too, that, so much of that is due to the strength of David Bateson's performance as 47, which I just wanted to call out.
There is no sort of Roger Moore eyebrow waggling here is the thing. It is totally flat in the best possible way. Like a villain, not even a villain, like a target might say something to Agent 47 like, oh, this thing that I'm asking the guy I believe you are to do is going to be very difficult. And he'll just go, yes, it's going to be murder. No laugh. No eyebrow.
Right, exactly. And David Bateson was originally not going to come back for these. Originally, they had been like, no, we're going to contract with somebody else. And
Timothy Oliphant.
That move would be justified.
Oh, God. The fans did a petition, actually, being like, please bring him back. And I'm so glad they did.
For good and for ill, like, obviously it's not good to sort of like yell at game developers, already the most yelled at people in the world, because your toys don't behave according to the way you like. That's quite hubristic. On the other hand, recasting a sort of beloved voice actor with someone else that you want to do is how you get like the Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes with Kiefer Sutherland, a bad imitation of a bad imitation of David Hayter. So
I think I should probably explain a little bit of my history with Hitman, in that I bounced off of it real hard. I had seen that it had gotten a lot of like really good reviews for Hitman 3 specifically, and I had just gotten a PS5 and there was like no games for it, and so I was like, I'll finally give Hitman a shot because I've heard
the PS5 has no games.
Yeah, it still really doesn't. Honestly, there's a couple good ones, but it's pretty barren. But I played Hitman 3, which was all 3 games sort of in one. And I started with the tutorial and I bounced off the tutorial. I couldn't. Yeah. Wow. I felt it. I found it to be very disorienting and confusing. I just never played a game like it before.
Yeah.
And
I was the same way. I was the exact same way.
But did either of you start in Hawke's Bay?
Well, that's what Brian then said to me. It was like, hey, you actually need to go to Hawke's Bay because that is the actual tutorial for the game. And I played Hawke's Bay and I got Hitman pilled and I just binged through the rest of the game. Like
the Hitman pill emits a big sort of cloud of green gas out of your drink.
It does. And I shut it right down. It's a tremendously designed level, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it becomes like the joy of Hitman. When I want to talk to people like to convince them to play the game, the joy of Hitman is to like actually do that thing in Groundhog Day where Bill Murray is just calling out all the things happening at the exact moment they happen because you've played it so many times that it's inside of you.
Right.
And the only like experience I've ever had that really encapsulates that is being an understudy in a show and doing multiple tracks and being able to see the show not as a show but as a series of like interconnected bits and working mechanics that it makes you feel like you're doing the dumb Sherlock Holmes thing where it's like he's just has all the information, the mind palace where it's all the information is in front of him and he's like waving his hands randomly in front of it and you know exactly what everything's happening. And that's the joy of Hitman for me, is actually knowing exactly when the guy's going to round the corner so I can punch him out, but then forgetting there's another guy who comes in and then you have to punch him out and soon you have a giant pile of bodies.
That's also why you shouldn't hire AJ as an understudy because he's always waving his hands around, moving things around in his mind palace.
I mean, that's why I never get hired as an actor. It's just Muppet arms at all times.
I think that's an interesting thing to draw out about like sort of failure within Hitman, right? 'Cause, like failure in the most obvious sense is like you get detected, you get killed. However, there's always scope in there for you to sort of like throw a wrench into things and go, okay, no, you know what? This is the comedy run now. I'm not going to get like sort of like silent, methodical, professional affect anymore. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm like turning on the sink in a bathroom to flood the floor so a guy comes in, trying to hit him in the back of the head, but he sees me in the mirror, beating the shit out of him. His friend comes in, I have to beat him up too, until eventually this bathroom is just full of security guards. And now I just close the door and go, that's the security guard bathroom.
And I think in Paris specifically, of maybe all the levels in this game, due to the fact that it's so fucking dense, I think it has some of the most opportunities for that moment when you go back and play it over and over and over again.
There's 300 NPCs in Paris alone, and they all have their own AI script. I mean, this game is so complicated. And as you said, Alice, like when you walk into like one of the first levels, it seems so like streamlined. Like you see the target walk down the stairs, but while that's happening, there are 4 AIs in the kitchen like making things and moving in between stations there. Like it hurts your mind to like try and conceive of it all in one go. Like it has to be experienced over and over again. And none more so than in our next level that we're talking about, Sapienza.
Yes, the very real Italian town of Sapienza.
Yes,
that's right.
I've been there.
Oh yeah,
I have. Yeah, yes.
Go on.
Does it neighbor Delaware?
Yeah. They're very close together. You take a ferry. It's about 30 minutes.
Similar sort of climate and like a sort of like beauty quotient.
Yeah.
Sapienza is my favorite level in the whole, still feel stupid saying World of Assassination. But
I just say the Hitman trilogy at this point.
Yeah.
I call it the World of Assassination because I'm a fucking nerd.
Well, I mean, what jumps out at you about this level, Alice? Why do you find yourself drawn so much?
So this is the second level. This is them trying to follow up on Paris. And first of all, the way that they did that was I mean, just the art direction, it's beautiful. I genuinely think this is the best I can remember a video game looking still. Maybe that's just because the version of it that like lives in my head has sort of like outgrown the real thing. But
well, they also know their like technical limitations because they're not going to animate things fully and have super big details, so they're always going to have the camera out away from your body quite a bit, right? You get a bigger picture, and that's what it's rendered for, and that's what it's designed for. It's designed perfectly for that.
And it's this sort of like this town on the Amalfi Coast, this sort of like little tourist town. And unlike having this sort of singular fortress, what you have are two targets and an objective. The sort of the plot here is you are fighting to defend your way of life as a hitman, right? You and your 7 dads have sort of like combined to create this profession, right? Where you go and you know like strangle people and shoot people or whatever. And
it's
this
actually
guy,
super progressive. It's about gay marriage and polygamy.
That's right.
And workers' rights.
Not to mention sort of like the class character of this. But so this Italian bioscientist has created a virus that can be like DNA targeted to kill a person. Like he's invented the heart attack gun.
Right.
A plot point that has been used to much worse effect in the movie No Time to Die. And you have to kill him, kill his lab partner, destroy the virus, and exfiltrate. And then it just dumps you in this town square. And you're in the middle of this small town, and just like, okay, the house, the big sort of mansion house where like at least one of these people is in, is over there. We don't know where the lab is, somewhere. Just, you know, fuck around, find out.
We've got up top, you know, initially one of the very first things you hear is this lady telling her coworker that he's going to be late for work, so you can go pursue that immediately. Rocco, you're going to be late for work, Rocco.
And he doesn't want to go to work because he's too busy gaming. He hasn't even put pants on. I mean, that's, you know, it's always good to cater to your audience in these things. And
he's just like me for real.
Well, and it caters to me because on the other side, you have 2 florists who ran over a bicyclist. And that's basically me. Every day of my life. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Driving over bicyclists, delivering flowers.
Noted guy who loves driving in cities, Brian Alford.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
That's what I'm all about.
Brian, is that a wig you have on?
And it kind of looks like it today, but
suspicious ability to podcast better than like almost anyone.
Sapienza, or World of Tomorrow, as this level is titled, is what's called by the developers a snail house. Now, again, just to go back to that
phrase. I love snail house. Just call it a shell.
Well, to go back to that no-clip video, a snail house is described as a more circular design where the objectives lie in the center, with the player encouraged to explore around it via the surrounding public spaces to discover various ways in.
Right, and because of that spiral, it will inevitably lead you to the center.
Right.
Like, no matter which route you take, you'll eventually find yourself in the lab where the virus is being developed. And it's such smart level design.
It's very clever the way that they make spaces, because there's, except for some bathrooms, not all, there's no place where you have one way in. There is always another door out of any given space. And so that means they all have to interconnect with each other, and it becomes this sort of like knotted up sort of Bloodborne type world that you're in.
It gives you like so much flexibility to move the targets like yourself as well, which is a thing that I really like. You can sort of like, you can force them to move like chess. You can like, there are certain actions you can take. You can like call them on the phone pretending to be someone else, and they will come down and meet you. You can like lure them into different places, and sort of like a more scripted way than you can guards, who you might have to distract by like throwing stuff and waiting for them to go like, what's that? I really like that. And then you have the sort of the center of this snail house is your sort of non-movable objective, which is to destroy this virus. To me, this is a problem that I like articulate with Sapienza, in that you're meant to be replaying this a bunch of times. You can change the way in which you kill any number of the targets, but you can't really change. There's like 2 ways to approach this, a kind of a stealthier one, a less stealthy one. It's always in the same place. You can't really do anything differently, and you have to do it every time. And that really sort of like sort of like funnels you at the end.
Yeah, and there's something about the nature of the snail house, the fact that it is the thing that you get to at the end, that means that oftentimes you're like, oh, God damn it, I have to destroy the fucking virus again.
So our targets are Silvio Caruso, who was a stem cell researcher who also was a client of 47's, and you can see the mission where he is your client in one of the alternate Sapienza stages. He is leading this project for the DNA virus. Then you have Francesca DeSantis, who is the wife of Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis,
and who is cucking him at work as well.
That's right.
A real fan of viruses, and she is the lab head. She is the one working for the company that is funding all of this, while Silvio Caruso is providing like the lab space and the genius and know-how to make it.
Yep.
And she's sort of ambitious, he's neurotic, and the two have this sort of like tension where they do not trust each other fully over the manufacturing of this virus that you can exploit. Ultimately, you can exploit it to the point of showing DeSantis whether truly or not that he's going to kill her, and so she has to like have him killed in self-defense.
And they are both trying to kill each other. It's one they do this in a couple other levels. It's one of my favorite things to find out because you can social engineer them to like actually do it.
And the mechanic that's used to make those sorts of things unfold is something called mission stories, which we haven't really talked about yet. This is something that the developers have put into the game to give you a way in so that you can manipulate the world through interactions that are sort of pre-built storylines, much like an adventure game, that you can interact with in your own way if you don't want to do an elimination with just the raw mechanics. And it also helps tell the story.
Yeah, and that's something I desperately needed to get into Hitman, were these mission stories. And apparently in the alpha build of Paris, there were no mission stories, and players were like, I don't know what to do. There's so many options. I don't know what path to take.
You can turn these off, but it's like, it's overwhelming, especially if you've never played that level before. It's really...
Even in the UI of Hitman 2016, it's a little hard to get the mission stories fully figured out. I think they made it even clearer in Hitman, and they narrowed it down. There's not like 6 of them. There's like 3 or 2 or 4.
Sapienza has 19 mission stories. 19.
It's so many.
It's one of the reasons why I love it so much is because no one was like limiting them yet. They weren't like what I would say, right, is between this and the sort of episodic content release, which Sapienza was also just an episode. This came out in isolation. You were just meant to play this as like a slice and then do the next one. What I would say is that between the mission stories, the episode release, unless you're being racist, IO Interactive, listen to the fans less. Please listen to me less. I don't know what I'm talking about. Do what you want, because this thing is pure baroque, right? It's like, we're going to add all of the details that we can. We're going to add absolutely everything that we want to into this, just for the sake of doing it. Like, for instance, you can, there's an apartment across from Rocco's apartment that you've been using as a safe house.
Rocco!
the game doesn't tell you this. It just, you get in there because you already have a key, and you see the like sleeping bag on the floor, and just in the kitchen, 47 has been cooking up an explosive golf ball. The game does not acknowledge this at all.
It just sits there on the table and it just says explosive golf ball.
And
That's
it gives you the prompt to pick it up.
Yeah, and you drop it in the guy's thing of golf balls, he hits it, explodes. Perfect. It's just, I don't know how long that took to add, but it's never sort of acknowledged in any way at all. You can play the whole game, never have any idea that this exists, and yet it's in there. And so, listen to people less. Just do what you want. And
I have a question about this that I could not figure out. So I did my Sapienza run, and it turned into a comedic run, not intentionally, but I piled like 12 NPCs that I had to knock out because more of them just kept discovering bodies faster than I could like actually handle it. And I just decided to kind of roam around since my initial plan was just so dashed. And I kept finding these inflatable crocodiles that you could pop and get in like a little thing for. Does that lead anywhere? No, I couldn't find the last 2.
That's just a thing unto itself. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Just a little challenge reward.
Some of them are just like, hey, we put a thing in and we want you to notice it, so we made it a challenge.
Right. Yeah, I just opened a bathroom and there was a crocodile sitting in the tub staring at me, and I was just like, well, I have to kill this.
Yes.
But it's back to the sense of humor of the game and how it wants you to explore the world and have fun with it. And then also,
I love that the crocodiles appear in other places later. They're like, well, we developed it. We might as well just put it in the resort.
Yeah,
we might as well put it over here.
There's one in the pool in Marrakesh. There's another one at Haven Island later on.
Yeah, it's like comedy is this like beautiful tool to make reusing your own assets something that makes the player smile, which is like, what sort of like alchemy is going on there to make that happen?
Yeah. And like the expired can of spaghetti sauce, it always shows up in logical places like this house in New Zealand that's been mostly abandoned, but it first shows up here in Sapienza when you're in the kitchen and Silvio is like, you need to make my mother's recipe. You fucking asshole. You need to make the food exactly right, just like my dead mother, who he murdered, by the way.
And is haunted by her ghost?
And when you go into the pantry, you find out that it's just like Chef Boyardee, and you just dump it in, and because it's expired, he'll end up throwing up, and then you can throw him over the cliff.
It's a free poison, which is it's great. It's so funny because why wouldn't it be?
And what I love about that too, I mean, going just for a second, going to like the kitchen and things you can find in the kitchen, things you can find in these different places. I love a game where the pickups that are available in different places are what you would expect to find there. This is another thing that Hitman has in common with some of the greatest immersive sims.
Name them. Name the greatest immersive sims.
Well, I'd love to, AJ. You've got Deus Ex, you've got Thief, and you've got Thief 2: The Metal Age. Also, Prey 2017, Prey does this. Like, if you're in the kitchen, what are you going to find in the kitchen? You're going to find food. You're going to find rat poison. You're going to find, knives. You're going to find cleavers. What are you going to find in a garage? You're going to find gasoline canisters. You're going to find wrenches. A shovel.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like
that was one of the first times I was like, oh, the game is actually clicking because I'm not just memorizing things in a level. I go into a new level and I'm like, I want to get some rat poison. Let's find the the basement
find
level.
The basement,
there will
find
be,
the kitchen.
Or a shed.
Mm-hmm. Where's the working class? They got the poison.
Right.
And like in previous Hitman games, they would do, they had a thing called instinct mode, which they still have in this. And the deal with instinct mode is it's Hitman vision. It's Batman's detective vision from every Batman game.
Wait, I'm sorry, they have a what mode? There's an instinct mode in this game?
Yes.
That's when you hold down the control key.
It doesn't slow time.
No, it's for AJ, it's when you hold down the R1 key. You have never seen the red outlines around.
I never used this mechanic.
Oh shit! Christ
Not
almighty,
once.
AJ. No wonder you were having trouble.
Oh my god!
You can turn it off, right? Or just not know it exists. Maybe the tutorial is not comprehensive.
Sure fucking can.
It doesn't slow anything down. It used to do that. In Absolution, it actually showed enemies like footpaths ahead of
it's
them.
It's also
which
like
was really,
how you snuck too. Like everyone would be an enforcer if they were in the same job class as you, so you had to use instinct to like walk
really
by them.
Weird decision.
And Agent 47 would like scratch his eyebrow with his head down. That's how you knew he was being stealthy.
Which isn't fun, so they got rid of it, which is great.
Yeah.
It was also perishable. Like you had a limit to how much you could do it.
Yeah. So instead of that, it just like highlights stuff that might be useful, like, the thing balanced precariously over the guy's head or whatever. But you don't need that to play the game. You don't need that to find things because it's teaching you to like think about this and like sort of like read the level design through like opportunities for violence. So you can be like, oh, electricians. Not only am I going to get an electrician disguise here, I'm probably going to get a screwdriver, for instance, or like a battery or something like that.
Yeah, this guy might have a key. This guy might have a key card, something like that.
But it's also like when I think about like detective vision, I always think about the bat vision from like the Rocksteady Arkham games, right?
Yeah.
And you need that detective vision to play those games because nothing is like lit in the environment. Like you have to.
Too dark.
It's banking on you to actually use the detective vision to play the game. But me not knowing that this was a mechanic, the game just taught me how to find things.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I'm going to go back and play the games with the instinct now.
The thing about the Batman movies, the Batman games, is that they're, the Batman movies too, I guess, is that they're about a capitalist beating up proletarians.
Right.
Whereas the Hitman games are about you as a proletarian killing capitalists.
Yes.
So,
But also, I do want to say, Agent 47 is no friend to his fellow worker.
No, he's
because
not.
You get to kill the elites by by seriously hurting fellow workers.
Yes.
Chefs, waiters, the lowliest of these are all knocked over the head with a crowbar at the quickest opportunity.
The slightest provocation.
Or by a homing suitcase that you heave over your head and just fucking locks onto your target. That's my favorite mechanic in the entire game, is the homing suitcase.
But so, I think it speaks to the lighting, though, because of course Batman's dark, because, he uses the dark to his advantage. Hitman, you barely ever use shadow to your advantage. You barely ever use dark. It's all just sort of like beautifully lit and well-lit environments, because it's a game about getting into like rich people's fancy spaces and fucking them up.
And one of the big things that you can do this is like with the social qualities of this character. So when you follow Silvio around, you start to find what his problems are. And you can overhear conversations with the butler or the guards out front. And it turns out this guy's mom died 2 years ago. And last year he saw her ghost and passed out. And all of these things factor into certain VIPs that you can become, like the psychologist or whoever, where you can get him to admit to killing his mother, or you can drive him insane by making him think the ghost is back, or you can throw a VHS tape in a little video and he'll just watch it, and you can cut his throat with a circumcision knife. For some reason.
In the body of like a plague doctor. Fucking cool. Like it just gives you it. That's another thing.
So many good outfits in this level.
So many good outfits.
35 of them.
So many great like options to do stuff that they put in just because they thought it would look cool, and generally it does. Alice, I'm curious, like, what are your favorite assassinations that you can pull off in Sapienza?
Oh, my favorite assassination that I can pull off in Sapienza is probably the one where you kill DeSantis by, like, making use of the lab's biosecurity protocol. So the lab is, like, constantly flooded with incredibly toxic gas in order to, like, kill the virus if it escapes. So you have to have a hazmat suit to get in there. And so the most sort of, like, Acme Cartoons thing that you can do, right? She is your roadrunner in this moment, right? Is you can destroy the virus. She comes down to the lab, and then you, Wile E. Coyote, turn off the hazmat, turn off the gas so it's safe for her to be in there. She walks in, goes, what the fuck is up with this? Starts berating people because, this is a game about bosses. And then you just hit the button to turn the gas back on while she's in there without a suit on and walk for the exit. You don't even have to look back. It's beautiful. And it's like, it's funny. It's elegant. It sort of like exploits her hubris and her sort of like the stuff that you found out about her, that she's quite domineering towards her subordinates. You can just put all of that stuff together and just make it as easy as pushing a button on a console, because you have set everything else up for you to do that. And I really like that. That's my favorite by far.
The thing about the lab now, to pull it back in, is that is the last objective, obviously. Something that's fun about doing the assassination that way is you can take care of the virus and of DeSantis at the same time, right? But you always have to destroy that virus at the end. And like you were saying, Alice, there's really just a couple ways you can do it. You can go and like use, like there's a little console that you can overheat from the outside or the inside to make it happen. Or you can just shoot the vial, which you can do from a distance or up close or whatever it is that you want. But either way,
there's another one that's linked to a story mission that I think is fun because it incorporates the church, and you can find a scientist like doing confession because another scientist has just died in the lab.
Workplace injury. This guy shook hands with danger.
Well, this workplace is clearly not OSHA approved either.
And you can steal the outfit, but she has a dongle that is destroy the virus dongle.
Some women do. Let's not make a big thing of this.
But there is that piece there too, I suppose, about like guilt, which is interesting. Guilt plays a major role in this, Catholic guilt specifically.
She has a whole a whole personality that they have written in just to be able to facilitate this one single solution in the level.
The lead writer of all of every game in this trilogy said like the joke inside the studio is that they build these incredibly complex characters that have these deep, rich emotional lives and like wants and needs, and then they kill them off at the end of the episode and have to start over all over again.
Yeah.
It must be genuinely very satisfying to write in that way. I suspect. And it's
to continue to sort of fill in the gaps and be like, what's another thing that we can find out about this person over here?
It's another thing that sort of the episodic structure works quite well for it as well.
Right.
Is one of the things that I really like about Sapienza is in the same way to Knives Out 2, and we'll talk about Knives Out 1 later, I suspect.
Yeah.
We sure will.
The setting, like, it speaks to whimsy because it's very much like, fuck it, let's do a white telephone sort of like still kind of 1960s Italy. We just feel like it. Let's just do one of those. And so that feeling of, I feel like doing setting X is like, not every Hitman level has it, but the ones that do, and Sapienza is sort of the preeminent of them, that really is something that I enjoy.
My one favorite thing about Sapienza is this one thing that is totally hidden away, doesn't even have a challenge attached to it directly. But, you know, as you find these characters, Francesca DeSantis, she's spying on Silvio. He's very paranoid. He thinks she's spying on him, and it turns out she is. And she later even makes the decision in a phone call with the bosses that she's going to kill him somewhere down the line.
Yeah, she makes that decision while standing in a sort of like ankle deep puddle of water that you can electrify, by the way. Every single Hitman target flirts with death about 10 times a second.
There's a private investigator she can meet with. You can either steal his identity or let her meet with him. If you do, you'll find out that Silvio Caruso hired him to get like the DNA of his high school bullies so that he can take them out with the DNA virus. You later find out, because he is spying on her, because she is spying on him, he is spying on her, he has grabbed DNA from her and is engineering a virus to kill her.
Wild.
It's already engineered. It doesn't acknowledge this, as you say, but it's hidden in a sort of like little boat model in one room. Totally unacknowledged.
You can shoot the boat, break it open, and there is a vial of the virus that you can just throw. And it won't hurt anyone else, but as the like gas comes out of it, it'll get her sick and she will die. There's no other death like this in the entire series.
That kills you instantly.
Amazing. Yeah.
Wow, man. It is just no time to die. Which is so funny. This is a small thing about James Bond, but but it's the perfect time. It turns out in that movie, it's the perfect time to die.
Yeah.
Because that's when he fucking dies. So like,
ideal time to die.
Yeah,
quite a lot of time to die, actually. Specific time to die.
So Sapienza is an excellent example of, you know, taking lots of different moving pieces in a massive world, giving you all of the tools and all of the stories and all of the everything you could possibly want to generate basically infinite narratives. The next level that we're going to look at is an example of doing pretty much the exact opposite thing, keeping it as tight and focused as possible for the sake of orienting players in how to play the game. This is Hawke's Bay, which is the first level of Hitman 2.
My tutorial.
AJ's tutorial.
This was the thing for me as well. That was just like, now I understand what the game is doing. Yes. Now I really finally have figured it out because it's walked me through it. And then I played Hitman 1 levels, and they're harder than Hitman 2 and 3 levels. And I was still like, oh, I can't do this quite yet. I'll just play Hitman 2 levels right now.
So this level is called Night Call. And the way that it's set up is basically Agent 47 is out on the case again. Yeehaw, here he goes.
Just like that.
Agent Detective 47 is following up on some plot threads.
Exactly.
There's this militia that you're going after at this point. And so you are going after sort of the heads of this militia, who it turns out the militia was manipulating you to some of the contracts you did in Hitman 1. I feel like that's the simplest way of putting it.
So Hitman rolls up, Agent 47 himself rolls up in a little skiff. He floats up in a little skiff. It doesn't have wheels on it. It's a fucking boat, wearing a wetsuit. And one of the strokes of genius of what this level does immediately is that there are no other characters anywhere. There are no NPCs, enemy or otherwise. Basically, you realize, like I am now being given permission to explore the whole space in the way that I want. But the level itself is designed in such a way that none of the house, because you're going into basically this like island beach house, the temporary home of your target, none of it is actually accessible to you at the very beginning. And so you learn a number of things. You learn how to crouch and move. You learn how to disable security cameras. You learn how to use items to interact with the world. You have to go pick up a screwdriver and use it to rewire a garage door opener.
Or shoot open a vase and grab a key.
Right. Again, options. You've got options. But it's also then teaching you mechanically that this is a game about infiltration to some extent.
Yes.
You are going to do this as part of the journey of the game.
Yeah. And even if you played through Hitman 1 and you're good at it, it shows you the changes that they have made for Hitman 2.
Right.
Like, cameras actually do something now.
You also have the ability to start setting up the assassination ahead of time if you want. You can like poison some ingredients for drinks. You can set up various booby traps. Like,
yeah, it just gives you a bunch of weapons. Like, you see the you see this safe room that you're able to open up, and it's just full of grenades and ninja stars and guns.
And it's just like, have fun with it, you know?
Exactly.
Which is, it's a great thing for a game to tell you in its tutorial. And then after you've had time to poke around, then it introduces guards and your targets. And even then, there's only like maybe a dozen of them. This is like by far the smallest level, and it's quite close, it's quite compact in a way that I really like, because these people are at home. They think that they're safe.
Yeah, exactly.
You're following them around, being, experiencing their sort of domestic routine. It's them getting back after a boring party, doing doing a boring work call, which is because they're assassins arranging an assassination.
They kidnapped the family of like the CEO of Amazon in this universe.
Having a drink to unwind, and then like brushing their teeth and going to bed. And you like follow all of this through, and you like try and decide where you want to sort of like make your incision, as it were.
And what's cool about it too is that because they think they're safe, but it's actually been infiltrated, the whole level until you get a suit is a danger zone, which is something they tried to do again in Colorado to much less effect.
Yeah.
Why this works so well is that it's baked into sort of the plot line of what it is you're trying to do, and you immediately feel that sense of danger. But the patrol routes and so forth are set up in a way where it's both challenging and rewarding. And that challenge reward dynamic is just not there in Colorado, which we're not going to talk about extensively.
This is a refining of Colorado's stuff to, I think, a very fine sheen. I mean, my favorite part about the level is that you could go through a window and step on a rubber duck, and it just fucks you completely over, unless you know the rubber ducky is there. And there are actually, I've only found 2 rubber ducks so far, but there's one in the window, and then there's one by the bedside. And my most satisfying
in
kill,
this level, they're Kiwis.
Oh, that's right, because we're in New Zealand. But you can replace, my favorite kill that I've ever done in this level is I replaced the rubber kiwi by the bed with an explosive rubber duck. And so they think they're safe.
I didn't know you could do that. See, this is the great thing about this game is that, like, I think every single one of us will have come away from this with like something we didn't know just from talking to other people. Like, that's incredible.
It's a perfect like schoolyard game. Like, this is the kind of game like if you would just go and be like, so what'd you do last night? Oh,
if you shoot the boat, there's a virus in there. You know, like what? No, fuck
that
you.
Can't
That's
be.
I have an uncle in IO in Copenhagen.
We don't visit him on Christmas anymore.
The other thing that I love about the way that they set this up too is that there's so many ways that you can do the elimination. We've mentioned a few of these because, again, Alma, basically what she does is she takes a drink, she turns in for the night, she takes like a shower beforehand or something.
The drink is funny too because it's the one random element in this level.
Yeah.
Because you can poison her honey. You can poison her honey, you can poison her sugar, but she might choose the other thing.
Right.
It's random whether she'll choose honey or sugar. I don't think that happens at any other point in the series. It's just a fun little thing they throw in there.
That's what makes for a great fucking game, is when you can do emergent things through the mechanics that are allowed by the developers for the sake of giving you that opportunity. Like, that's what I love about Hawk's Base so much in general, is that there's training wheels up until the guards arrive, right? And then after that, training wheels are off. You got to figure this shit out for yourself. Have fun.
And it's still so simple that figuring it out is not intimidating.
Yes.
It's like, okay, there's a set number of patterns that I have to look at. Alma Reynard, her whole thing is fully scripted, beginning to end. She's not in a loop. She doesn't have any proximity trigger type things. There's no other costume where you go up and talk to her about stuff. It's just these simple things. If she's in danger, she'll run to the safe room. And then there are a couple things where she'll run out onto the beach and maybe even run straight out into the water and do like the ending of Death Stranding until she drowns. But
whoa, what? Really?
Yeah, she can do that. But like so much of this can be so much more simple. And there's like these really funny little conversations they're having with each other about the people they killed and the fact that the guards are only out patrolling the beach because their dog got out and their dog is some just massive beast that's killing all the sheep nearby.
Orson is really mad that the home AI hasn't been able to remember his name.
Right? Yeah. It still remembers the ex-boyfriend.
That, like, she won't update it because she's like sort of like humiliating him a little bit every time they come in, where it's like, welcome home, Alma, and guest.
Yeah.
It's such a great little character moment for both of them, really.
Yeah. They're fantastically drawn characters. You get also like the TV that you can watch and get some exposition on what's been going on between the two games. It's just a delight. It's just a really, really nice little level. And for my money, like honestly, I would even prefer this to the larger levels as much as I love the audacity of them. It's just like if there were twice as many just small, tiny levels like this, it would be perfect. It would be just for me and my little toys.
Little kind of doll's house.
Yes.
Yeah, my favorite thing about finishing this level specifically, because with the main tutorial on the boat, like you have a very like set number of things that you can do, and they're all pretty straightforward. But when I played Hawke's Bay and I finished and I looked at the challenges, I was like, you can do what?
Yeah.
Like, you can climb on the roof and like poison everybody through the air ducts. Like you can, you send them to a panic room and then blow the like roof off there and snipe them through the top there. Like there's just the possibilities are endless. There's a driftwood weapon that I still haven't figured out how to use, really, but like is
you
there
just
if
hit
you
people
want it.
with it. Yeah.
Well, and that's not even getting into the escalation, which takes place inside of Orson's nightmare, where you show up as a spooky jack-o'-lantern guy and knock him out with a spooky bat.
This series also does these things called elusive targets that I'm not the biggest fan of because it's just like a thing shows up. If you have the slightest failure, it's closed off to you. They've kind of remedied that with the arcade mode that they have now. But even Hawke's Bay, they were like, well, it's so small. Let's redesign the whole thing story-wise to just fit the elusive target. And I think they have a very clever little level there that's totally populated by different characters.
And
I think it's worth talking about elusive targets specifically.
Yes.
They brought this in as part of sort of like the time-limited version of the Netflix thing, right? This target like appears, there's a new sort of like bonus mini level set in the same place as the main story level. It's live for like some period, like a week or whatever. And you get one try at the mission. If you die, then you just die and you can't like repeat it again.
Yeah, if you die in the game, you die in real life.
Exactly.
Yeah, they kill you.
Palmer Lucky comes to your house and fits you with the like Oculus Rift with the explosive charges.
Oh no, he's got a spooky bat.
I kind of had mixed feelings about this because I could see what they were going for, but I felt sort of antithetical to this game that like was about replayability and about trying a bunch of different things to see what worked. And so, you know, I'm kind of glad that they reversed themselves. What I really want them to do is just like reactivate all of them, so you can just like replay them at your leisure. But
kill Gary Busey.
I want to kill Gary Busey.
Or Sean Bean, which was, I think, probably the funniest sort of like idea for a sort of like meta-textual cameo in this. I've never seen them do.
Can you behead him? Can you actually like fully behead Sean Bean?
I don't think you can behead Sean Bean. I don't think they have the facilities for that, which is a shame.
Yeah, and there's no beheading in the game. But there is that broadsword that you can use to like slice people in the middle of the head.
That's right.
Yeah.
The thing about elusive targets, too, is that they're always sort of, unless it's like Hawke's Bay, where they pretty much redesign the whole level to accommodate the elusive target, there's a situation where everything else in the main game still continues to happen alongside the elusive target, and it's the same, so it doesn't feel new or fresh. I actually streamed, in prep for this episode, I streamed some Hitman, and we went in and played whatever the elusive target was that week, and he was hiding out in Marrakesh. And I hadn't played the night. It's
the guy with the face tattoos.
Yeah, Mr. Giggles. And I hadn't played the night version of Marrakesh before. And I ended up going down the road of basically trying to eliminate the main targets in the way that the mission stories had outlined because I wasn't familiar with that story. And so finally,
you were just following,
Yeah, and so I was like, Chad, help me out. Like, what the hell is going on here? And he was like, yeah, that guy is connected to the main target, not the elusive target. Like, you're going to get nowhere doing this. It's one of those ideas that I think is fun-ish, but would be a lot more fun if they really committed to it, but also you kind of can't commit to it if it's only a limited exclusive run thing. So
right. Yeah. So Hawke's Bay really, I think for a lot of people who maybe had no familiarity with Hitman before, like AJ, or people who are bad at games like me, was the way in to be like, this is how it works. Right. You can hide in grass now too. Like that helps things.
That's
out.
huge. Yeah.
That's huge. And it's like, here are all of the little pieces. Now go forth to the next levels and figure all of them out. And we will go forth to our next levels right after a quick break.
Greetings, fellow thespians. It is I, Mortimer Montgomery Morton III, the best immersive theatre actor since Ignatius Incognito, an actor so immersive that while playing the titular role in the Lindbergh Baby musical, he disappeared entirely. Lovers of the stage! Are you hungry for meteor roles? Do you find yourself auditioning for the same boring things over and over again? Do you want to explore the lucrative and life-affirming world of immersive theatre? Then join the best acting troupe this side of Redacted, the ICA Acting Troupe. With the ICA Acting Troupe, you'll get to play all the most sought-after parts. Roles as varied and diverse as a butler, literal Santa, and a giant murderous flamingo. So join the ICA Acting Troupe today, and you can be like me, Mortimer Montgomery Morton III, or should I say, Chef Boyardee, chef to the stars. Now, I might look like an ordinary chef to the stars, but don't be fooled. I'm an actor playing a chef. So how about I whip us up some nice omelettes, huh? Now, where the devil is my frying pan? Oh, my panache!
Hello, it's me, the guy who was talking before. Don't worry about that sound from before. After all, you can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs.
Chef, mon ami, they are really putting our service to the test out there. Sacre bleu! Ooh, I am Gérard Depascrude!
Bonjour, it is me, the French waiter, or whatever. Can I interest you in some creme pat? It's to die for.
Oi! What's all this then? Oh, God, blimey.
All right, just going to lock the door here. Good. Now that we're alone, can I ask you something? What's it like to be happy? I feel like I've forgotten. My days feel like an endless cycle of death, a relentless wheel of murder, and staring meaningfully out of windows. But there was a time when there was a spark of something inside me that felt maybe not happy, but better. Somehow, I was part of an acting company, the director of which was an active war criminal and inflatable crocodile fetishist who died under mysterious circumstances involving an inflatable crocodile. My infiltration started easily enough, interacting with my fellow actors, ending every conversation with "break a leg," or "I'm going to slay this part," or when standing next to a loose wire near the lighting board, indicating that my favorite theater game was Zip, Zap, Zop. But during one of our rehearsals, my target, the director, gave one of his many speeches singing the praises of Stella Adler and the squishy, squeaky feeling of an inflatable crocodile between your thighs. But this time, he stopped, cleaned his glasses, and said, "The art of acting isn't about inhabiting another person. It's about becoming more of yourself." And as I donned my costume to play the titular role in the Lindbergh Baby musical, I looked in the mirror and saw not a grown man in a bonnet and blue onesie, but rather, I saw myself. And I remember feeling for the first time, not passive indifference or outright disgust, but warmth in my chest. Is that what happiness feels like, listeners? I want to feel it again. I want to start again. Please, somebody, let me start again. I don't want to kill anymore. I want to be a baby again. I want to be a baby again. I want to be a baby again.
Ugh, is somebody screaming about a baby in here? Ooh, gosh. Ooh, ah.
So join the acting troupe that puts the A in ICA. The ICA acting troupe. It's curtains for you.
I'm having Sprite with grenadine.
Ooh.
Just a little Shirley Temple. No big deal.
I really thought it was just going to I'm having Sprite.
Yeah, this is like questioning intonation. Having Sprite?
Red Sprite.
I was looking at a different tab, and all I heard was, I have Sprite, and then just profound silence. Like, oh God, did my feed cut out?
The supermarket near me is a lot like Costco, right? They like have to have their own brand of stuff. And so instead of sparkling water, they've decided they needed a specifically Italian sparkling water to imitate San Pellegrino.
Oh, of course.
So I have something called San Celestino, which...
That's a Hitman level.
Yeah, well, exactly. I pulled this off of a shelf in Sapienza, and it helpfully informs me with a little Italian flag on there that it is both sparkling and frizzante.
That's awesome. Does it have like the little foil top on it that you have to peel off and everything
they don't have the budget for that. This is purely like sort of like legally not affiliated with San Pellegrino.
Sure.
I have this. I got this expired tomato sauce from Sapienza, so I'm gonna have some tasty nudes after this.
That's where I got my red Sprite.
Sprite code red? Is that what
exactly?
Well, I think they do make a cranberry Sprite around like the holidays, so I think that might actually come out red.
Upsetting concept to me.
Anyway,
isn't it?
We're back. We're back.
One of my enemies.
So we spent our time at the end of the first half talking about the beginning of Hitman 2. In the course of Hitman 2, there's some story things that sort of kind of happen. The leader of the militia ends up becoming your bud. It turns out you were at the Romanian orphanage where they did all the lab experiments.
Oh my God, they were roommates.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They're kind of it's interesting because there is like this sort of brotherly, but maybe it's a little more close than brotherly connection between them.
Yeah, the way the writer describes it is that Diana Burnwood is your conscience, is Agent 47's conscience, and that Mr. Gray is in fact his emotions. So
okay, so Diana is Jiminy Cricket, Gray is the Blue Fairy. Who's Stromboli in all of this?
me, double player.
We should talk about Diana a little bit as well too, because she's
absolutely.
If you want to be reductive, she's your mum, both in terms of character and in terms of player, right? Because she's the one who points at some rich dipshit and goes, "That is rich dipshit. That's 47."
It's one of those things too where they definitely like. I don't think it intended to start as a trope, but then they clearly leaned into it because of how much people loved it.
It's kind of a standard thing for stealth games because I think it's kind of a standard thing for spy stuff, right? You're going to have Otacon in your ear or Master Miller or whoever the guys are in Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell series.
Lambert, yes, God.
Lambert.
You could also compare her to M. She's not maybe quite as powerful necessarily or as well connected as M in the 007 universe, but she's, again, similar kind of character.
Yeah, and she's there to give you sort of wry humor. Yeah, like someone falls off of a balcony and she says, "Well, I guess he lost his balance or something."
Right.
Who knows? But like the big thing that you find out in over the course of Hitman 2 is that the guy who was leading the militia, who was kind of your enemy at the end of Hitman 1, the beginning of Hitman 2, he's your friend. He's subject number 6, whereas you were 47. Your memory got erased. His didn't. who knows how many dads he has? Whose children are they?
Dads?
But he's got
Whose dads are they?
He's got a beard and he's got hair. So like, one of them was not bald.
Different dads.
Right.
Yeah, because we know that there were like clones of 47 in previous games, but they're also like cue balls.
Well, it's also the more emotions that you lose, the balder you get. That's just...
I've sort of found from like investigating guys on Twitter that the opposite is generally true, but...
So Lucas Gray, subject number 6, the militia leader, this guy is leading a whole charge against these guys called Providence, who are the Freemasons. And so the leaders of Providence are all going to be meeting at this one place. You've had this little thing with one of the dudes leading the whole Romanian orphanage thing. You've killed him in Vermont.
And I do want to take a moment to talk about that level as well.
Sure.
Not in extensive detail or anything, but just to point up, Whittleton Creek in Vermont is probably my favorite Hitman level.
Really?
In many ways, it's because it is such a love letter to blood money.
That's true.
The name of the level is Another Life, which is a direct reference to the level A New Life from Blood Money.
And it's also like this beautiful sort of like triple meaning too, because you see the life that Janus is leading, which is of course different from the life he used to have.
Right.
And it's also this stark contrast to 47, who can never live this kind of life.
Yeah.
Right.
He is destined to be outside of it.
They put, I think, one of the better lines in the game in Lucas Gray's mouth, where he says, your gift and your curse to touch lives only by ending them, which I really like.
One of the cool things about Whittleton Creek, too, to the point of like lives and looking into people's lives, is I feel like this is one of the levels where you most get to see sort of into the private lives of some of these NPCs. Because, again, it's a suburb. You can go into a number of these houses. They're all sort of configured in different ways. There's one arc where you can become a realtor and you can actually like be the realtor and walk the target around one of the targets. And, you can assassinate him in the house, all sorts of fun stuff like that.
It's some of the best dialogue that they give him, because he keeps trying to sell the house based on how you can do murder in each room.
Yeah, because he sees the world the same way that you have been taught to after playing the game for this long.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, if you press R1.
He's like, there's a very capacious sort of closet there. This is a lot of dark shadow in this area.
You can even, if you have the lock pick, you can get into the room that is otherwise locked, and there's just like blood spatters all over the walls. It's great, and it advances the plot because, again, Janus, he's the bad guy. You have to kill him. You can go down into a basement. You find a secret communist basement.
Well, don't we all have those?
Yeah, it's just full of like Lubitels and Kiev 80s.
He's like, sorry, the shutter doesn't work on that one. Shutter doesn't work on that one. Shutter doesn't work on that one, but I'm pretty sure that's a coincidence.
I love Whittleton Creek. I don't know if the rest of you have thoughts on that at all.
I love it too. I don't want to talk about it now because I'm holding out hope we do another Hitman episode where we go in on Whittleton Creek.
I
do want to say that like Hawke's Bay and Whittleton Creek both happened because Square Enix dropped IO.
Interesting.
So so IO had to go independent. But Square actually comes off sounding pretty good in this whole deal. They had to drop them. They tried to sell them to a couple of other companies, but IO actually said, we don't want to be sold to that company. We want to do this on our own terms. They went independent. They dropped the other games that they were developing outside of the franchise. They fired about half of their staff. Thankfully, Denmark is heavily unionized, and there are very specific rules for how that stuff needs to be handled, and everyone kind of ended up on their feet.
Sure.
Especially because everyone just went and worked for Unity down the street. But, then they realized that they were going to have to get rid of a bunch of new systems that they were going to be putting in, which I imagine involved more of that like randomization element that you saw in Hawke's Bay. But it also led to the creation of Hawke's Bay and Whittleton Creek.
Very cool.
Because they were going to do 6 extremely large levels, and they weren't going to be able to do a full 6 large levels, so they gave us 2 small ones.
And then they also sort of promised, we'll give you 2 more on the back end, sort of like post-release.
Which they did, and it's crazy, and they're really good.
And we'll talk about one of those briefly later on as well, but I feel like, we should go now here right to the Isle of
scale.
Scale? Yeah. I mean, this is a sort of an invented location. As far as I know, it's the first one to be like not have that sort of sense of place of being like, oh, this is in a country. It's sort of like nebulously Scotland, but it's like in the middle of the Atlantic sort of thing.
It's the evil island from a lot of Bond films, I think. Like, there's no volcano, but it's like...
And it's beautiful. Like you're going there. There are these choppy seas. There's this whole semi-ruined castle with this big structure structure on top of this like totally glass Apple Store penthouse. That's sitting atop the entire castle.
Yeah, it's a level about sort of a struggle between new and old forms of power, and that like expresses itself in the architecture.
Yeah.
And so this level is called the Ark Society, so named for the secret society that is having their meeting. Apparently, it's an annual get-together.
I should also say the host of my favorite line in the whole game, because we've talked about how this game loves, or the series of games loves, behind the scenes, and how it has a sort of sympathy with the amount of work required to like set up all of these big set piece events, and like people laying all of the wiring and doing all of the lights and stuff like that. If you go sort of like backstage at this event, someone like gives like two NPCs, two workers are talking to each other and sort of having this conversation. On the one hand is useful intelligence, which is, oh, hey, you know, the main guys of this Ark Society, they have like a separate disguise. They have their own floor. And they're called the Architects with a K. And then when she hears this, or when he hears this, the other NPC goes, man, must have spent a long time thinking that one up, huh? And it's just like, oh, this is perfect. All of the people working here are also laughing at these people. Like, they're ridiculous in universe as well.
Isn't that just one of those things where it's like, this is in many ways, walking around this world is the same feeling I get when I look at like a fucking NFT convention or some shit like that.
It's so closely observed. Like, I don't know how much you, or indeed the listener, have spent with like really rich people, but I've been sort of unfortunate enough, and fortunate in other ways, to do that at times, and they really are like this, and they are on a completely different planet. It's so closely observed that it's like, no, once you get rich enough, once you get powerful enough, you start acting like a Hitman target in your daily life.
The developers of this game really know how this behavior actually works. It is so true to life.
I'm like standing under the chandelier going, why isn't my chandelier repair guy here yet? At like 120 decibels.
I mean, it's so interesting, like the one of the Washington sisters, because, you know, a thing we haven't really talked about in terms of Hitman targets yet is that they operate sort of in two modes. Either they're roamers or they're dwellers.
Yes.
And so the Washington sisters, who you have to assassinate in this mission.
Sophia is the dweller. She's the one upstairs, and Zoe walks around.
Right. Well, it's just all these investors come up to them, just like, or like all these people like in need of investment come up to them and like pitch them on like these wild sci-fi ideas. There's one person who's just like, yeah, we have this thing where we make clones in the basement, and then we can just like map your brain onto the clones, and then it's just like respawning in a video game. She's like, oh, that's interesting. How far is that away? And she's like, oh, like a very long time. And she's like, oh, I'll give you 20% raise in your budget. I mean, why not? And it's just like such a waste of money when you've just come from the basement where there are people like working over hot stoves to just make sure that this eyes wide shut party actually like goes off without a hitch.
A thing that the trilogy does really well, I think my favorite levels are all these big event levels where there is something going on sort of that's set up to be kind of a temporary event in a space, and these rich people are attending it. You have this public element. Scale starts like that as well. You have this central public area, but like, you know, Paris is built like that. Miami has some degree of that. Scale is like that, and my favorite, Dubai is also like that, and my favorite level, which is the vineyard at the end of the second to last level in Hitman 3, where you just spend some time with this party of incredibly out of touch human beings. And they'll even comment on things that have happened in previous event levels. You know, they're all getting together and shooting the shit about some guys that you personally killed while you're standing next to them.
So a few things about this world then that we learn just from, you know, walking around and listening to these horrible people talk to each other. First of all, we learned from the briefing actually that Zoe and Sophia Washington are heirs to this massive fortune. They're third generation wealthy.
Their dad runs a conservative think
Yeah,
tank.
yeah. Their dad is the head of the Claremont Institute.
The politics of this game get less subtle as it goes on, you know?
Yes. But yeah, like they're out of touch sicko Princetonites, you know.
Yeah, they're also like treasure hunters, so they just go to like the Congo
they're
and
also
kill
Indiana
people
Jones.
and steal shit. Yeah.
All of these rich fuckers are here for the Jellicle Ball, more or less.
Yeah. And it is set up very eyes wide shut. Everyone is wearing masks, and there are people who even comment on it at the bar because they have the musicians who are blindfolded too. They're like, what do they think is happening? Oh, probably something with a lot more nudity because no one's actually fucking.
Yeah, they're too boring to fuck. And like, the other thing is like we've mentioned a bunch of other levels that have this here, but one great thing that I love in a Hitman level is a party. Because who doesn't love being the spectre at the feast, right? Who doesn't love that? Particularly this kind of like masquerade thing. Another great level in Blood Money that never gets its due is You Better Watch Out, which is like, it's Christmas themed. That's not really important. It's like Santa Con is on at that time.
Oh, wow. To be a hitman at Santa Con.
you have to essentially kill like a sort of thinly veiled Hugh Hefner and like a sort of dipshit congressman's fail son. And it's you have to like mingle. You have to be amongst these people who are enjoying themselves, and it's really great at making you feel like you are sort of being let in on a secret amongst these people, you know, where they feel safe with each other, and they shouldn't, because they're all standing under chandeliers.
Yes. And
or portcullises.
You know, it's not as if they're all at the same level either. Like that's what I find so fascinating about the design here too, is that the levels of wealth are very literally represented, right? Down in the basement, you have the proles, right? You have the people who are working the event, the people in the kitchen, the wait staff, stuff like that. As you continue to ascend the tower, the levels of access become more and more guarded, and you need, you know, better and better disguises to successfully infiltrate. So too does the level of class of the people who are in those levels. Like when we're on the base level, which, by the way, we learned at the very beginning that you don't necessarily have to be a member of the Ark Society proper to even attend this thing. This is their way of cultivating new recruits. So as long as you don't go into the keep, which is where the really fancy people are, you are able to walk around just as a regular person. So on the base level, the very first thing you step into is a fucking timeshare presentation for a vault under Svalbard. It's amazing.
You all of a sudden just find yourself just walking into like a Hudson Yards apartment, and it's all just covered in white plastic, and there's a fish tank, and they're like, so this will set you back about $30 million, but it'll help you survive the climate apocalypse.
Right.
And everyone's just getting ready, and that's the thing, is it's not a let's go bang some people party. It's a let's get ready for the climate apocalypse party. And this is very much a real thing.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a very sort of like persuasive and like seductive even way of introducing you to its like vision of wealth, right? Is all of these people are richer than you can possibly imagine. And then there's people who are richer than they can possibly imagine. And which is true. Like Jeff Bezos is like infinitely richer than the richest person you can imagine. But is it so much of a stretch then to say, perhaps there are people who are like, you know, above even them, and that's where you get to the like Illuminati, secret society, Freemason stuff.
And the iconography as you climb the tower and like ascend the social thing becomes more and more culty. The higher you get, like the robes get more ornate, the symbols get more important, until you're the penthouse of it has like knight in shining armor outfits that you can hide in, and a freaking Iron Maiden, I think.
And there's also like this element that it's like these people all know it's a game. Like this big secretive gathering with occult imagery and all this other stuff. It's like, to them it's just, they don't believe any of this shit. They don't believe in Baphomet or something. It's a fun way to play dress up and do the little thing that they saw in the Kubrick movie. It's just, that's what it's always been.
It's Bohemian Grove, exactly. It's that sort of thing where it's like, it's
the faggiest thing I've ever seen, according
Richard
to Nixon.
Listen, he might not have been able to say it, but was he wrong? Impossible to say.
And this climate change thing, again, how this interacts with what they're actually doing at the event also varies based on the level. Like I said, On the ground level, there's a timeshare presentation for underneath the Svalbard seed vault. And then the next level up, there is a pitch for like Hyperborea, which I guess is just going to be building big arcologies in the Arctic somewhere surrounded by photovoltaic domes.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you find out, too, if you spend enough time just listening to the side conversations, is that there are a number of patents that are held by the Arc Society, by Providence, by whoever, that have not been released to the public. So this is that classic Illuminati stuff. They figured out fusion.
Right.
So they're going to have a fusion reactor up in the Arctic ready to go once global warming kills most of the human population.
They're going to be up there getting photovoltaic dome off of each other, and you know, everyone else is going to be either like making their fancy little crudités or dead.
There are other people who are going to get into like a cold fusion rocket that is going to bring them to Titan, where everything I'm sure will go just fine.
It's going to be awesome. We're going to be on... And, you know, that's why I'm so excited for humanity to go to Mars. I think, you know, Elon Musk is going to get us there, and it's
going to be great.
It's going to turn out just fine.
Didn't he basically just like pitch indentured servitude for Mars?
He did.
Wasn't that his big plan for it?
That's all it is.
But here's the thing. Like, again, I can't tell to what extent a guy like Elon Musk really believes what he's pitching versus... just knowing that it's a sucker's game and it's a way to get more money. I think it's pretty heavily the latter, but I don't...
It's hard because he is a fucking moron.
He's very stupid. Yeah. I don't know, Alice. I guess this is a question for you, right? Like, when we get to the top, we then find the secret society. Their whole game is, well, we're just going to reverse the climate apocalypse now and make everything better and make more money off of that too. Overall, like the way that this presents the layers of wealth, the layers of power, and all that, you know, on Trashfuture, y'all spend a lot of time talking about these dynamics.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that Hitman is an anti-capitalist game? Do you think that it effectively reflects sort of what the actual status of things is in the real world?
Is Agent 47 woke?
Yes, he woke.
Does he say the pronouns? I mean, look, we're all sort of constrained by capitalist realism, right? This is a capitalist product made by capitalists to, you know, be sold to you, the consumer, right? Can it contain a critique of capital? Obviously. Is that critique sort of like subsumed within capital? Also, yes. But you can tell where its sympathies lie, right? And its sympathies very much are with, if not sort of like workers, then sort of against the rich. And these people are sort of like hubristic, vulgar, stupid, often violent, and they're sort of protected from the consequences of their actions. And so it's this power fantasy that you know, someone can sort of like, one of my favorite pieces of sort of like left-wing political art is, it's called From the Depths. It's like a worker's fist punching through the floor of a ballroom, and a bunch of people in like tuxedos and like ball gowns looking down at the floor, very confused as to how this sort of like improbable thing could have happened. And you know, Hitman works much the same way spatially, as you sort of like, admittedly, you hit people over the head with a frying pan to do this, right? But you sort of, you start at the bottom and you sort of trade up disguises until you're able to like climb all the way up through until, you know, and often this is sort of like imbued with a sense of verticality as well, until you're able to like see these people as they really are. And often, I think this is the thing where you see the most sympathy for it, is that often you don't really have to do much to kill them. They kill themselves, either through some combination of like arrogance or like hostility. Or...
Let me go look at my very sharp trophy on the desk for a few minutes.
Exactly.
Let me go inspect this Iron Maiden as I monologue at you, facing away from you about how I'm going to get you, actually.
The guards are the difficult part. Like, they themselves are the easy part, and they're easy and they're satisfying, and that's kind of like the reward function of this game too, is you've done this thing and you've done it well, but also like as a bonus you now get to like push the guy over the balcony. So I mean it is anti-capitalist in that sense. However, you know, to sort of pull from another great anti-capitalist video game, Disco Elysium, right?
Which we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. Joyce Messier says much the same thing, which is like any critique of capital just gets subsumed into capital. I think you should like... It's fun. It may even be inspirational. However, I think you should sort of go into it with a sense of perspective that this is an entertainment product, right?
For sure.
Well, and I think there's something that factors into like the practical consideration of like they wanted you to play a hitman. They didn't want you to play a game where you're just some psychopathic killer.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so they talk about like what's the sympathetic way to do this? And of course the sympathetic way to do this is to kill the richest people on earth.
Right.
It says perhaps more about the audience that is primed for this kind of thing now, where like that wasn't necessarily how Hitman was built early on.
That's
it was
true.
like, you know, drug lords and gang leaders and things like that. And now it's about like societal elites. And so it says something about like how audiences are perceiving the world today and what would be sort of their way in.
Yeah, and it's curious how like the person you're invited to sympathize with has changed, right? Because Hitman, I'm going to sort of deliver a bit of a spoiler for the legal system here. Hitmen aren't real. If you hire a hitman, you are talking to the police, right? That's just sort of like an iron law of hitmanning, right?
The typical like real hitman is a person who kills one other person on a contract and they don't do it again.
Yes,
like it's someone who's already in. If they're real, if they're not just a policeman that's that you found on Craigslist, it's just some guy who's already working in some capacity for some organization like a drug running ring or something like that.
We know the sort of avenues that our society has for professional killers, and Hitman is not one of them.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is like in way back the first game, as far as I remember, you actually got like paid. This extended even to blood money, and you could use that money to spend on upgrades and stuff.
Buy guns, buy enhancements to your guns.
They're actually going to put this into a totally new gameplay mode that they're releasing in a couple months.
Yeah, which I'm very curious to see because this sort of sort of speaks to my point. In the storyline, Agent 47 doesn't really do much hitmanning for money. Money doesn't figure into it. No. It's sort of like he's propelled for the story, and like half the time he's doing this one as a favor for somebody to find something out, for revenge.
For vengeance.
Exactly.
Yeah, eventually he's doing it for himself, which is very interesting because in the earlier Hitman games, he's a completely blank slate. He has no agency whatsoever.
Right. He has one agency, and it's the agency that tells him what to do.
Yeah, the ICA.
Yeah, it's just like whatever Diana tells you. They're the ones making the money. Right. You just are already on salary.
Which is fine. Like, give me like, another couple of dozen levels like that. I'll play them quite happily.
Absolutely.
All of these sort of another favorite, Traditions of the Trade, which is sort of in this like millefeuille of a like hotel in Budapest that you get to unpack and like drown a guy in the spa. And the thing on that one is purely like you are being paid to do this, so go do it. Right. They never wanted to be that unsympathetic with it. And so now it's gotten to this point where it's like, Hitman is woke, right? He's working with this sort of like all-inclusive crew of like counter assassins in order to like stick it to the 1%, which more power to them.
I think the thing that's interesting about a piece of this, though, is sort of in conversation with, we had mentioned Deus Ex earlier, how rather than being happy to be a very straightforward class critique, it does at some point end up tipping over into the Illuminati is real. It doesn't go as far as Deus Ex, obviously, where you end up in Area 51 and you're shooting gray aliens, But I guess I'm curious if the rest of you found that the fact that the twist at the end is this secret society actually is going to be able to unfuck the planet no problem, and they just need to profit from it. I found that really disappointing, and I'm curious what the rest of you feel about that.
So you're saying that like ICA can actually help the world if it comes in the form of like public-private partnerships. No, you're saying that's the perspective of this trilogy. It's this can be reformed, maybe.
I get no. I'm saying the perspective of the trilogy, I think, is that the elites are in control. They're always kind of gonna be in control. And, well, I guess in a way you're right? That the only way to take down these power dynamics is to infiltrate the elite, as opposed to just, I don't know, doing class warfare and guillotining the landlords, for instance.
Yeah, Hitman is like a sort of like he's a balance, he's a check on power, and we actually see in the world of assassination, we do see one popular protest in Marrakesh in Morocco.
Yes,
and we see that not only is this only useful as a tool to facilitate an assassination, but it is being orchestrated by like the hidden hand, the man behind the man.
Yeah, it's an op.
Yeah, it's an op.
Right.
I think, the game kind of gets to this point where it's like, well, there's no answer here. Once you get to Hitman 3, everything kind of moves back into place. They get a new sovereign. They get the new heads of Providence. Once you get rid of the old one, it all just kind of goes away and comes back and goes away and comes back.
Right.
And the real solution at the end of those games is just the personal journey of 47, the personal journey of Diana Burnwood, and just being like, maybe we're gone now. Maybe we're just not doing this anymore.
Do you know the meme? Explaining a meme on the podcast is the least funny thing you can do, but I'm going to do it anyway. The woman like, hello human resources, when the ugly guy sexually harasses her or whatever. It was like Absolution going, this one's more about Hitman Agent 47's personal journey than it is about sort of killing for money. Me being like, hello human resources. Hitman World of Assassination going, this one's more about Agent 47's personal journey, and I'm like, oh, you're sweet.
It's also that it posits that Diana becoming the head of Providence, which is what happens at the end of Hitman 3, that she's able to dismantle the Illuminati.
Dismantle the system from within, you say?
Yeah,
it's
and
Fabianism.
And that's the solution.
The long march through the institutions.
And then they become freelancers, because it's like, well, there's always going to be powerful people trying to like do some bad shit, so we just have to be the two people standing between them and like world annihilation. I'm like, well, that's
check out our new game mode, February 2023.
Yeah, exactly. Back in the game.
What we see, I think there's actually kind of a parallel to that in Janus, because Janus is the one who set up the Ark Society, right? That guy you killed in Vermont, who was overseeing the give kids 7 dads and see what happens experiments. You see that he set up the Ark Society to be like this post-capitalist communism of the elite. It was a future where everyone is supposed to be egalitarian, and even within the structure of the event, they can't help but having like 3 tiers. They cannot help but having the upper class, the lower upper class, and then the architects themselves, who are the inner circle and the people who are going on the rockets and everything.
Which the Constant, who is your nemesis for most of Hitman 2, actually uses as an argument when he's trying to persuade the coal mogul, who is part of the secret society, to not join in on the plan. Because it's like, there's going to be 100 guys, but guess what? All of them will have equal status. That's communism.
If you want a place in this future world, you're not going to get to be on top anymore, because the situation won't allow for it. And so he's like, oh, well, I don't know about that.
I love finding out little things about Janus too. If you don his disguise and play him in the funeral, like he wrestled a bear at one point. Like, this guy is just Bond. I think. I think he's just supposed to be Bond.
Also, just wanted to point up as well that Janus's funeral is another really nice callback to Blood Money, where they've got the cellist who plays Ave Maria and the whole fucking thing.
Diana even says stuff, because I hadn't gotten that far in Blood Money when I played this, but Diana like mentions that she's like, oh, this is rather familiar, and I'm like, why is this familiar? What am I missing? What else am I missing?
It's from the one time when you died.
And there are these 3 big events. There is that that meeting between the oil barons and shit, where they make the decision on whether they're going to invest in like solar power or whatever. There is this big like bonfire where everyone burns their money in a giant statue, and then there's Janus's funeral, and of course all of these can be used as different ways to do murder.
Yeah, you can actually burn I think Zoe. And then it becomes a real Jellicle ball, because we're actually sacrificing somebody and sending her up to the heaviside layer.
You can also become like a pledge, and like you have to find coins around the place while you're dressed like a cuckold, and like you have to.
It's like, here's your dipshit outfit. You have to like wear this and run around.
And there's really funny conversations that happen with the other guys in dipshit outfits, where they're just like, "Could you please give me a coin? Oh, please."
And then you try and feed them, and they say they're full, but
they're getting so full. Yeah, Goku is actually one of the pledges. Goku is also not a friend to the working man.
We keep feeding Goku coins, chocolate coins in this case, He grows larger. It is what it is. So once we leave the Isle of Sale, once we have successfully eliminated Zoe and Sophia Washington,
and we got the Constant.
Well, we preserved the Constant. We didn't kill him.
We got him. We grabbed
He's
him and
ours.
took him hostage.
He's on a boat.
We
now.
got his ass. We then, at that point, move on to New York. There's a bank level. And this one is... It doesn't... I mean, it sort of continues the plot, but New York largely exists, I think, to be like a fun puzzle box kind of environment.
Yes.
And I know, Alice, when we were talking about doing this episode, this was something that you really specifically wanted to talk about. So I'm curious to hear what about New York is,
So I was very keen to talk about New York because I think it's like the pure puzzle box level in the same way that, I don't know why I have Call of Duty on the brain, but when they did Call of Duty Modern
because it's
Warfare,
really good.
They did the like
pinnacle of storytelling,
sort of like post-credits plane mission that's just like, now let's do a fun one, right? Where it's like, we've gotten all of the sort of story that we were wedded to out of the way. Now let's just like strip this down to the sort of the gameplay essentials, a very sort of like thinly drawn version of the plot, and you just like enjoy that for the mechanics. I think that's sort of the same space that New York occupies, where it's like, rich people, bank, that's it, go. And it just sort of like shoves you in the door. It sort of like allows you to take apart this thing. It also is, to me, a very interesting example of something that is not a temporary event, but a permanent workplace. You're like infiltrating this place as an office more than a bank. And in fact, you see some bank robbers are like off to the side planning a heist. And if you try and like take their disguise and shoot up the place, I mean, you can do it, but it's very difficult and it's also very stupid.
Yeah, it gives you no advantages or story. It's just like, now you're dressed as a bunny with a gun.
Which is the joke of it.
And it's like, you could approach robbing this bank as a bank robbery, or you could approach it as a job interview and like sort of incapacitate the guy who was there for a job interview and go take their little personality tests, or
it's so
go
good.
impersonate this dysfunctional employee, or go take advantage of this other dysfunctional employee.
Yeah, or crash the whole stock market.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's like, again, it's sort of like quite closely drawn in terms of like the number of people that you have to have in your head at any one time to make this work is relatively low. In terms of like the complexity of navigating the level, it's quite low. It's just the 3 levels with one boss at the top.
And no exterior.
Yeah.
Like it's all inside the whole time.
Sort of like big granite walls, which again sort of like really constrain you. The other thing that I really like about it is that it introduces this sort of like new mechanic that requires you to use the homing suitcase, where you have to pull the sort of like the server records from the vault.
Yes.
But if you're holding these, which are conveniently briefcase sized, then everyone is hostile to you. You cannot like walk out with a big robbery sack with a $sign on it.
Right.
And so it becomes this sort of like complicated game of like maneuvering around different suitcases to try and like get out of people's line of sight to transfer it from one to the other. And I really enjoyed that.
And you don't even have to do that. That's the other fun thing.
Right, because there's 2 ways you can do the actual thing. You've always got to eliminate Athena, who is the president of the bank or whatever. You can do that through all the normal ways you
Queen
could
of the bank.
ever do in Hitman games.
Her Majesty, the Queen of the Bank.
That's exactly right.
Spends all her time standing at like a big window that looks over a 50-foot drop.
Just
with
conveniently,
an ominous clock above it.
a clock face that is very easily breakable glass. There's that, and then there's also you have to get either the special data by infiltrating the vault and pulling out the conveniently suitcase-sized backups, or you can go around and pick up backup data disks off of the target and her 2 associates. Either strat is viable, and it's just how do you want to play, which I think is an interesting answer to the question posed by Sapienza, which is like, how fun is it to have a supplemental thing you have to do where you always kind of have to do it in the same way every time? This gives you a lot more freedom. And I don't know, I'm curious, Alice, if that paid off better for you
very
than
much.
Sapienza.
To me, that's like one reason why I was so keen on it, is because it feels like them solving the problem that I have with Sapienza. And it's something that like shows up in Colorado and a bunch of others, where like the ending of the level is the same. Whereas like here
with Colorado, they just patched it out. They just made you do it one time, and then they're like, "Fuck it, you don't have to do that again."
Which was smart. And I kind of wish that they had like been able to figure out a way to do the same thing for Sapienza even. For New York, it's kind of like it's much more open at the end, which I like. It broadens outwards. It's sort of curious because on the art direction, right, you wouldn't think that this is a particularly memorable level. Like, there's a lot of much more colorful, more vibrant levels. This is like, it's mostly gray. It's in a bank. They're not really fun places.
There's like a whole pack of Santas that just makes its way outside the front door.
But what I enjoy is kind of precisely that, is that it is a break from the sort of like rich hubris stuff, because it makes the hitmanness, the stuff that they inject into it, like the security guard who keeps going to have a drink in the break room or whatever, like that's much more stark. And also it's sort of like it gives you more of a sense of world. There is some work happening to maintain this enormous system of like power and privilege, and like people having to actually do it. And it doesn't just exist in cutscenes, and it isn't all party all the time. It's all of this all the time in order to sustain the party for everyone else at the top.
And it like, if we're talking about Hitman in terms of it being like a TV show, like this is the bottle episode of Hitman.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
sure. Where you're able to like get laser focused in on these interactions and expand the world out just through like these little tiny things. And it's like a diamond sheen, this level. Like it feels the most, like, as you said, the most distilled Hitman experience you could have is in this. Like, I do miss the grand vistas myself, but I mean, you can't fault the mechanics of this level. Like, it is
There's
done.
an NPC in this level, and I don't know if this is randomized and maybe it shows up in other levels, but I only experienced it in the bank when I was actually playing it earlier today. I pulled a gun out and pointed it at just a random NPC, and he said, "Go ahead, do it. I don't have anything else going for me anymore."
That's awesome.
If you try and like knock someone unconscious with a sleeper hold, there's like a sort of a 1 in 50 chance that the guard will say thank you, which he just like me, for real.
Wow. Really makes you think.
There's some great little like stupid NPC conversations that I've just been listening to over the last couple days. There's one in Bangkok where two characters are talking to each other, and one's like, "So did you hear what happened to blah, blah, blah?" And she's like, "No, I've been in Switzerland splitting atoms."
Wow.
Oh, okay, I guess that's a good excuse.
Holy
There's
God.
one that I caught in Sapienza where someone sitting by the ice cream shop just starts babbling about like, I was reading a thing that like, if 1 billion people all jumped at once, it would throw the Earth off of its orbit and it would crash into the sun. And I was thinking about like the fact that China has more than 1 billion people and they're all so obedient. So if their leader told them to jump, then it would destroy the Earth. And her friend is like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Why do I still go out on these dates with you?" Like,
I will say that was an amazingly realistic portrayal of the average reporter in the AP's China Bureau.
I just the amount of writing in this game, the depth of writing, and the like ability to like nail all of these different tones from like just like idiot in coffee shop all the way up to like guy who controls the world economy is just so impressive.
Let's cross the pond now over to Dartmoor.
My favorite level, baby.
I know it is, AJ, and I'm very excited for you to...
God, I love Thornbridge Manor. Holy shit. Yeah. Sure. So it's located in Dartmoor, England, which I have never been to, but it seems like a horrible place.
Yeah, you're not missing much.
It's slightly radioactive at all times.
Oh, is that true? Why?
I learned that from an
that?
episode of QI.
So
Why
is the
is
US
that?
capital. Background radiation is weird.
So is my hometown. He just like me for real.
You're sent to assassinate. Basically, in Hitman 3, you find out that Providence is run by 3 different partners of 3 of like the big families. The Stuyvesants, the Carlyles.
I love that one of them is the Stuyvesants.
Yeah, me too.
Not just because of living in New York and seeing the name Stuyvesant everywhere, but also because I like to... my racism against the Dutch. I like an opportunity to kill a Dutchman.
Of course. That's actually how our show is going to end eventually, with Brian
Finale is
killing
gonna be me killing
Spend another
Josh.
3 hours talking about the one contracts level set in Rotterdam.
Yeah. Brian, it's so weird. When did you get that barcode tattoo on the back of your head? It's, so the third family is the Ingram family, but the one we're focusing on for purposes of Thornbridge Manor is the Carlyle family, specifically the matriarch of the Carlyle family, Alexa Christine Carlyle, who is modeled after Margaret Thatcher and is called the Iron Magnate. To really drive that point home.
Terrible puns.
Or tortured wordplay.
Real hard. Apparently,
and you got to encounter her in scale. If you had done the meeting with the masked figures, you'll hear her voice, but of course she's wearing the robes and mask.
Right. Yeah, and they've like seated her in a couple of the cutscenes in 2 when we see the constant like meeting with Providence. So like
in your little VR chat.
yeah, where they're on the top of a mountain, I guess. Yeah. Apparently, she's also responsible for the war in the Falklands. Like that's like a big thing
that's something that she and Margaret Thatcher have in common. Yeah.
That's true. You're called there to take her out, but it turns out it's a very inopportune time for the Carlyle clan. The entire family is gathered there to do a fake funeral for Alexa Carlyle to throw any assassin off the scent because the other two partners are dead.
Right. And you saw this in the New York level. Like they are finding new identities to build, and that's what the bonus levels in Hitman 2 were for, so that they can then like fake die and then move away somewhere.
And so at this reunion, at this family reunion, it turns out that Zachary Carlyle, who is the younger brother of Alexa Carlyle, has been found dead by apparent suicide.
At this point, they may as well put up on the briefing screen, "We're doing Knives Out." And I would be clapping like a trained seal.
Exactly. And here's the thing, Alice, I was.
I was. I had a feeling, AJ.
Oh, this level's so good. It's so much fun. And I mean, it's still a Hitman level. You can still do some other things. You can kill her using the funerary arrangement.
You don't even have to do that.
Using a photographer.
You can just walk in with a shotgun you brought from home.
Absolutely.
Kill everyone and leave and miss out on everything if you want to.
But the game is like really directly funneling you into this one thing. They're like, the first time you play this, you better knock out this one guy because we got a whole fucking thing for you. It's a treat.
Yeah.
Enjoy our treats.
And it is a delightful treat because you take on the guise of Phineas Whitmer, which is an amazing name for a detective.
It's the distant cousin of noted Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. A few notes.
That's right. He's the guy who actually spoiled the whole kidnapping plot against her.
Through his excellent investigation skills,
They set up a murder mystery for you that is so much more detailed than I ever anticipated. They did not have to make the murder mystery this good and this complex, but they did. You can also, my favorite actually way to kill Alexa in this, I keep saying that and I have an Alexa and she keeps perking up every time I say it.
Just say Carlyle.
Yeah, Carlyle. So in order to kill Carlyle, my favorite way to do it is to electrocute her at her own family. Sorry, hold on, Alexa's talking. Alexa, shut up! But my favorite way to kill Carlyle is to put her in her family photo and then electrocute her by the with the fountain.
It gives you the photo of like her being electrocuted.
Oh, it's so funny.
I guess we should also talk about a recurring bit, and one of my favorite recurring bits in the Hitman trilogy is Agent 47 has inexplicable, probably dad-derived talents that if he needs to do something like some piece of technical training or something in order to pull off an assassination, he knows how to do it. He knows yoga in order to be a yoga coach. If you can disguise yourself as a drummer in a rock band, the lead singer who you're trying
Phil
to
Collins
assassinate,
came in handy there.
Just points you at the drum kit and goes, okay, prove you're a real drummer. You know how to drum.
He's a very clever. He's like a very skilled masseuse.
Exactly. And so from this,
he has psychiatric training.
And from this,
what goes on? A good therapist.
You genuinely can get the guy to have a breakthrough before you kill him, which is very funny.
Which the other psychiatrist can't do.
Yeah.
It's really good.
That's so funny.
See, he's really good at these things. And so, of course, presented with a murder mystery, why wouldn't he be the world's greatest detective?
And it turns out he is. And the way that this level is designed with all of its like secret rooms. I mean, it's you can unlock this. You get a cane that's in the shape of a dog that you can then insert into like certain slots, and then it opens like secret back rooms.
Yeah, and of course you can pull open books off of the shelf that will open the door on the other side.
This mystery is actually very hard to figure out. I had a really hard time with it my first couple goes, but it leads you towards one of three sort of solutions, and ultimately, because it's a Hitman game, it doesn't matter if you solve the case.
No.
Because all of it is just to gain access to like the file that she keeps in her office, and that just requires a lot of detective legwork, but you want to solve the case. The game really puts enough interesting characters out in front of you that you want to know what their deal is.
What's interesting is that each of the potential answers offers you a different route to assassinating her, including there is one which I actually don't want to spoil if no one's found it or no one's played it, but you can work things in such a way that you give her an answer so depressing that she kills herself.
Yes. Yeah, she'll like let you into the safe. You can also just ask for money and then they'll just drop a like block of dollar bills asset on the desk and she'll walk away and you will have not gotten into the safe.
Yep.
But you can ask her into the safe and then she'll be like, oh, you're the guy. You're the hitman. I guess you're not here to kill me then. Anyway. And in one case, you can push her off if you want to. She can jump off. You can tell her the butler did it. You can tell her it was a suicide. I think that's the one that makes her do it. And then you can also find out the real mystery, not tell her, but use that time to make sure that the real murderer, in fact, poisons her drink and leads her to die.
Yeah.
And I think we've been talking a lot about, what the game has to say about class. And this is actually, I think, the most effective level at getting what it has to say about rich people, which is that money just corrupts people. Like it takes, like there's no getting out of it. Like each one of the Carlyles that you meet has just something like horribly, horribly wrong with them.
Yes.
Like Gregory, the eldest son, he lacks any and all ambition. Edward, the
he's
second
Jerry
son,
Falwell Jr. basically.
Exactly.
This is a new sort of revolution in gaming in that it's the first game, I think, to seriously attempt a typology of fail sons.
Yeah, because Edward, the second son, I think is the biggest fail son. He's a neurotic mess who has these debilitating self-esteem issues. Like he apparently climbed a tree and then couldn't get back down as a kid, and so his mom climbed up the tree and then climbed back down and said, "See, I can do it. Do it yourself," and like left him up there.
Edward is sort of the most, I guess, relatively speaking, relatable of all of them, but he definitely has that quality to what you were saying earlier, Alice, about like hanging out with people who are like extremely wealthy. He's got that like learned helplessness about him. Where it's like, so you just never had to learn how to do anything. And so that's where this comes from, is you've never had any real challenges in life. Therefore, you've never had to surmount any obstacles. Therefore, you're just a completely useless fucking person.
And perpetually the victim, too.
Yes.
Like he, I think he's married for like a month and she leaves because he's too clingy. Like he can't do anything without her there. And then Rebecca Carlyle, who is the only daughter of the matriarch, who shall remain nameless, she seems basically fine, but she's a reporter and she's like doing a story about her family. So she can't even really escape the power of the Carlyle name. Like she doesn't have free will, really. She has to be subservient to the family.
It's kind of like Shiv in Succession.
The one who could be the most relatively adjusted, but is just so attached to this familial wealth that she does a lot of terrible things just because of her proximity to it. And then there's like Patrick Carlyle, who's the grandson, who's just a piece of shit, who like loves like going out to the clubs and stuff, and it's just
and torturing the house staff and like
you're sort of like Chris Evans Knives Out.
Exactly. And it's the level that really, because you have to spend so much time getting to know each member of the Carlyle family, you actually feel, I think, emotionally the effects of wealth, and it's like the toxicity of it a lot more acutely than in the other levels where you can see,
especially
like,
because this is old wealth. This is just like these people have been poisoned for longer than they've been alive.
And it's like
with just this horrible,
all of the walls are like covered in like hunting trophies, and everything sort of feels that ossified. You can
almost smell it, can't you? Especially when you turn on, if you have a very high-powered PC and you turn on all the particle effects and shit like that, the must practically comes out of the screen.
It stinks of tweed. Yes.
It reeks of it.
And rotting paper.
There's like a lot of like fun, goofy shit you can do in the mansion too. You can drop like the antlers, like moose antler chandelier onto the matriarch at one point. And I think the murder mystery is so good and so serious, but it never loses like the Hitman flavor that makes these games so appealing to me.
And even if you kill her with without like getting that answer and getting her to tell you what's, how to get into the safe or whatever. The way that you solve that puzzle is by doing this weird little like look around the room and see the number over the clock.
Right. It's an I Spy game.
Yeah.
Just built into her office. I adore this level, and it makes me long for like a Benoit Blanc video game made by IO Interactive.
These are the sort of like, and both Knives Out and Hitman sort of have this effect on me of turning me into sort of like a glutton, like the sort of like little boy in the sailor suit who's like, more please, like essentially like I walked out of Knives Out too and I was like, yeah, thanks Rian Johnson, give me like a couple dozen more of these fuckers. One a year for the rest of my life suits me perfectly, thanks.
I mean, there's a reason that Agatha Christie is one of the best-selling authors of all time, right? It's just that.
Right.
Forever.
Alice, have you seen the movie The Last of Sheila?
I have not.
Put that on your list. It's a movie co-written by Stephen Sondheim and Anthony Perkins,
already
of Psycho.
Triple underlined at this point, yes.
Yeah.
And it's about a bunch of rich, famous people who get on a boat to like go on some guy's like murder mystery party around the Mediterranean Sea, and then of course everything goes wrong. There's a scene that involves strangulation by way of hand puppets. It's an incredible movie, and it's so much of an influence on Knives Out and the sort of mystery that's not as straightforward as Agatha Christie, where like you get to the middle and it starts sprawling in all sorts of other directions. Yeah, highly recommend it.
Yeah, Glass Onion actually takes a lot from Sheila, from what I understand.
Yes,
I haven't
it's
seen
also
it yet,
on a boat.
But also, I think Rian Johnson is making a murder mystery TV show as well.
Ah, perfect.
So we're going to get a lot more of that.
I also had this response to the first Kenneth Branagh Poirot, the Murder on the Orient Express, and unfortunately I got my wish. I was like, I would have some more of this. Delightful. Please bring me another course. And then Kenneth Branagh did, which...
Never ask Kenneth Branagh for more.
Never do it. I feel like we've learned that lesson on this show before, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know why? Because he's going to bring you enough champagne to fill the Nile.
Champagne to fill the Nile. Fantastic line read. Yeah.
Yeah, the best. Just pitch perfect acting.
After Dartmoor's wrapped up, I want to say one more thing about Dartmoor, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
The last piece that I wanted to say about Dartmoor is that as much fun as the like core mechanics doing it through the mission story way is, it's also a tremendously satisfying mission to suit only because of the fact that it's a lot less patrolled. Like there are areas of the map that are designed to be very easy to get around and through. So if you want to really learn how to suit only levels in Hitman, Dartmoor makes for a great place to start because it's much easier to get around without being spotted. There's a whole lot of pipes and ledges and stuff like that you can use to climb up and around. I think this and Hawke's Bay are the only two that I actually have been able to successfully silent assassin suit only, figuring it out myself.
Yeah.
So,
I would say that like it's if I were listening and taking notes, which God forbid, it's fun when it does throw a lot of guards at you sometimes. Like the mission in Hokkaido where there's Yakuza guards who are more or less directly the crazy 88s from Kill Bill, right? That's sometimes a lot of fun, but in general, I think all of us enjoy a slightly more sedate, slightly less well-guarded Hitman level.
There is kind of a joy to accidentally leaving a body out and or killing two people at once and having to hide the bodies, but then another NPC shows up and finds the body. And I always, regardless of what the NPC says, whatever I hear in my head is, "Oi, what's all this then?" And then I go up behind them and knock them out.
Oh, I certainly hope you've got an Hitmanning license.
Hitmanning without a license.
Be beheaded.
Once we get away from Dartmoor, things continue to unfold. The game becomes about 47's own personal story.
Diana gets kidnapped. Your last message with her in that level is all scrambled and weird, and then she's gone.
Right. And so then there's a mission where you have to get Diana back, and then ultimately all of you team up,
Berghain,
which is amazing. But there's one guy left. And to get that,
and it's the constant. It's the
constant.
The guy
who's been the guy through the whole thing. And so there's this train level, which
slightly controversial, but it's the end of the game, and I don't hate when the end of the game is just we're at the end. We're gonna just get you there. go ahead and kill some guys. We're going to have a little bit of fun with it. It's not really designed the way that the other levels
I don't
are
really
designed.
judge it by the standards of like any of the other levels. It's not really a level. Although I will say, I think it's possible to do a train level more interestingly than this. And my source for this is Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, which has you like climbing like down the side or like under the bottom of like a TGV, going at like 300 kilometers an hour. That's fantastic. Give me more of that.
But ultimately, this is not trying to be that. This is just trying to be a linear resolution to 47's story on a high-speed train through the Carpathian Mountains, where you just end up getting all the guns. You know, you can still silent assassin it if you want, but it's really designed to finally give you the opportunity to go Rambo.
And the beginning of this level, you have to enter a little passcode. So, of course, you look around the environment, see where a number is written down. You see it's 1979. But the weird thing, and I have not seen anyone online mention this, which is why I have to bring it up here. It has to be spoken into the universe. In the world of Hitman, that poster that says 1979 is memorializing the fall of Skylab, the first American space station. Skylab fell in 79 over Australia. And no one died. It left orbit. I think it was a little bit messier than they were expecting it to be, but no one died. That poster in the train on the Carpathian Mountains level says it like something to the tune of "in memory of those lost." People in the universe of the Hitman games, for some reason, died on Skylab as it re-entered the atmosphere.
There was a Hitman Universalis who made sort of a riskier tweet 30 years earlier, you know.
Yeah. Anyway,
Graham Linehan really fixated on it. Yeah,
Brian, it's shocking that you know that. You yourself not coming from the Hitman universe. Where did you get that suit? You look really great in it. It fits you very well.
It's a really fetching red tie you have.
Yeah. It was one of those things where like, this is built for me because I just saw that poster and I was like, that's Skylab. Why are they saying people died on Skylab? My dad has a piece of Skylab like encased in resin in his house. It's sort of pointy and pyramid shaped, so you could like slam someone's head and
spend a lot of time like closely examining it through like a loop or something, like back to the rest of the room, you know. He dismisses his guards to be like, I want to be alone with the Skylab fragment for a minute.
I need to commune with those lost.
Hitman then pretty much concludes when you kill the constant. You hit your final man.
Or you can make him. You can give him the forgetting serum, and then he forgets everything.
Which is a fate worse than death. Which actually, having gone through the train level, I was like, yeah, no, this guy needs to suffer. At the beginning, I'm just gonna put him out of his misery, but like, no, he needs to die. Yeah, there actually is a plot twist in this trilogy that I found to be very effective, which was Diana's parents, and 47 was the architect of their demise. I found that to be very effective.
What's also interesting about that to me is that they did that in Hitman 2, a game which, for I suspect budget reasons, does not have cutscenes. It has a succession of like montages.
Which I think really work, actually. Like, they're very cool to look at. Like, because they're very intricately detailed, and no, there's no motion, but it feels like you're witnessing like a myth unfold as opposed to like just another cutscene in a video game.
Yeah. They're really good, is the thing.
They're just really good.
Even with this sort of like
good slideshows,
disjointed thing in the middle, like that separates the whole trilogy. Because I may be like imagining or misremembering this, but I think the original plan was to do sort of all three parts of the trilogy in nominally one game. Like they would just keep adding to it, and it would just be DLC forever.
Part 2 was already like mostly done when part 1 was like going out.
Yeah.
And so like I think they were halfway through and they were still like working on levels for Hitman 1. So it was just going to keep sort of rolling out all the way there. And then the business model just didn't work. People didn't trust it. They thought, is this some kind of scam? Is this like early access? Even though they're like, no, we're trying to design it so that you just spend a whole month playing a level. Like we've designed month-long levels.
Yeah. And they refer to them as seasons too. Like whenever you see the development, it's like, it's not Hitman 1, 2, and 3. It's like, oh, Hitman Season 1, Season 2, Season 3. Because it's just, I feel like I'm really glad I came in on Hitman 3 because it feels like a full game.
Yes.
Like if I had just played Hitman 1 and hit that season finale, I would have been like, that's it? Like that's the end of the game, and this one gives you like the full arc of it and gives you the full story, and it's wonderful.
And I think with all the ups and downs and occasional, like, they didn't quite know what they wanted to write, so they did something. They've managed to figure out how to pay off the ending, I think, pretty well. And people responded to this. I mean, Hitman, I think, I don't know the exact figures. Maybe you do, Brian, about like sales or anything like that.
I don't know that, but it's great. It's doing great sales, and and they have enough like cosmetic DLC or like the 7 Deadly Sins packs or things like that like the franchise. It's never been better for IO. Like they have never ever hit a point like they are currently at. And especially Hitman 3's release just grabbed way more attention even than the release of Hitman 2 or when they put out the tutorial for free. It's just getting bigger and bigger, and to the point where they're making an entirely new mode over top of this trilogy for free. It's just going to be added in for anyone who owns it.
They've been so generous with extra content in general. And plus, for the longest time, in order to like hook people in, they were like sort of giving sort of like whole levels away for like time limited periods and stuff. Yeah. So there was a while where you could have just like got this whole thing for like very cheap. So if this is something that like interests you enough to, listen to, this whole podcast about it, then you can sort of like, you can get a pretty good deal on it still. The whole thing start to finish.
And you know, it's on, it was originally an Epic Game Store exclusive on PC.
This is
now
the
it's
one
also
thing
on Steam.
I bitch about is I play almost everything on Steam. That's where I like to like organize my my head and stuff. And so I did the extremely convoluted process of transferring all of my progress, my unlocks and everything over.
Wasn't that an annoying fucking day?
Yeah, over to the Epic Store. Now it's the only thing I have on the Epic Store. And it's the only thing that I use it for. So I play it less now because I remember to start the Epic Store less.
Yeah. So, console game for life. Console gaming master race.
Oh boy. I think it's, playing through these games again and sort of prep for this, I kept thinking about Coriolanus. Just this idea of
I hardly knew her.
Oh boy. Just this idea of what happens when your protagonist is a gun. Like what, like how do you populate and like make a game interesting that you'll want to follow through for 3 whole games, like, and see it through to its conclusion. And I think this game, storytelling wise, kind of cracked the code, which is you just make everyone around him the most interesting character you've ever met in your life. And I know that Hitman is, even the writer admits it's gameplay first. But the thing that really struck me was just how good the storytelling is in these games. And none better than, I think, Dartmoor Manor, but it's all over the place. It's all over every level of this thing.
And that's why I'm so excited for whenever their fucking 007 game comes out. I have no idea when that's going to be, but...
Alice, I have so many questions.
I have so many
questions for you about this.
So this has been announced for a few years now, is that essentially Agent 47 has been paying for them to develop their other thing, which so far as I know, they're only calling Project 007. But a much less interesting man with a gun for a brain is being entrusted to them. All they're saying about it is that they're sort of like, they have more license, if you will, to do stuff with it than previous developers had, where it's just like paste a sort of Daniel Craig head onto a guy and then make a shooter.
Barbara Broccoli has gone on record saying that all the previous video games adaptations of James Bond were violence for the sake of violence and not worthy enough of the IP. So my question for you, Alice,
not quite as cerebral as James Bond.
What is the worth of the IP to you? What is the worth of the Bond IP?
Less than nothing. I press X to sexually harass nearest woman. I sort of understand that they want to do some sort of like Bond suaveness, right? I understand that that's part of his character. It's one of my least favorite aspects of his character because he's a racist, sexist, misogynist relic of the Cold War, or he's a racist, sexist, misogynist of the Cold War, and they say that in the movie, so you're not allowed to get mad at them. right?
Right.
Sure.
He
Just hang a big old lampshade on Daniel Craig's stony visage.
Exactly. And the Craig thing's even less. Like, you want to talk to me about a legacy of violence? Craig's thing basically is more violence, less suaveness. And sort of the history of the Bond franchise has been whichever broccoli is in charge of it, turning a big violence dial back and forth and looking at the audience for approval. Like, this one's too safe. We got to do like License to Kill and have a guy get his arms and legs bitten off by a shark. Oh, that's too much. You got to dial this one back. Now we have a robot car. So the most triangulating intellectual property that I can think of is going to be precious about the value of adaptation and preserving the brand is perverse to me. I think probably if anyone can make something out of it that I would want to play, it would be IO Interactive.
Absolutely.
I'm sort of torn, right? Because I want about 1 billion more Hitman things. Even though it's sort of come to a sort of a satisfactory conclusion in this one thing, I don't care. Keep making them. Because I'm greedy, right? And I want more. But
he must hit more men.
But so if it funds something else, if that success allows them to do something else, I would much rather that they sort of experiment and develop their own thing. Fuck, maybe even bring Freedom Fighters back. That was a good time. Instead of sort of like working on Cubby Broccoli's farm,
We're going to take a trip to that broccoli farm one day, perhaps. But until then, Alice, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. This has been fucking great.
A genuine pleasure. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks so much for having me on.
Is there anything that you wanted to pitch, plug, etc.?
Oh, I mean, I do podcasts everywhere. I'm on Twitter at Alice Avizandum. You can listen to Trashfuture. You can listen to Kill James Bond. You can listen to Well, There's Your Problem. Yeah, that's pretty much everything.
I just wanted to say that Kill James Bond is such a wonderful podcast, particularly the episode about the lives of others, which is one of my favorite movies. And it really does feel like you are sneaking into like the greatest film club of all time, and just like getting to hear these like incredibly rich intellectual conversations about sometimes very deeply vile movies.
But that's the joy of doing it for me, is that I've been able to like sort of smuggle vegetables, if you will, onto everyone's plate by like making them
broccoli.
Exactly. It's like you have to watch these dreadful movies, right? And then as a reward, I get to talk to you about something I really enjoy.
We also have a Patreon. It is $5 a month or more if you want to give us more. Opportunity to listen to a whole bunch of great episodes in our back catalog, including a few things we've talked about today, Disco Elysium being among them. So patreon.com/worstofall is your ticket for that, and we hope you check it out. I wanted to wrap up this episode by asking you one more question, Alice.
Sure.
AJ asked you, what is the worth of 007? And you said, less than 0. Now I want to ask you, what is the worth of Hitman?
Ooh, that's difficult. I mean, I genuinely do have a great deal of emotional affection for this silly, bald man, right? It's like, it's been sort of like part of the background of like my whole life, more or less. Like since I was a kid, I remember playing this. And sort of like watching it grow and evolve into this sort of like somewhat anti-capitalist, but mostly just like beautifully designed and made project. I really would attribute some worth to it, and I hope they keep making them.
Well, that pretty much sums it up, right?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, let's exfiltrate. I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. See you next week.
Thank you so much, Alice.
Oh, my pleasure.